Hello, viewers. I'm SB,
And I'm Shane.
And I'm Mike.
and we all love Snowpiercer. Wait, no, sorry, that's Wednesday's video. What are we doing? Video games. We all play lots of video games. Video games came out this decade. And I made a video last week about, I made a video recently about the games that I thought were great this year. And a bunch of people contacted me to say, well, what about the decade? SB, the numbers on the calendar, they changed, and you need to talk about what was good in the years that it used to be, not the year that it is now. And I thought that was an interesting idea, so I got my friends together here, and we're going to do that very thing. However, in attempting to put together what are the most important games of the decade, what are the best games of the decade, what are the most meaningful games of the decade, we discovered that all those questions are nonsense, and you can't do that. So we decided instead just to talk about the games that were most important to us, the games that had the biggest impact on us, the games that were the most meaningful to us, three very conceited men.
That part's
Thank
true.
you. Thank you, I appreciate that. I'm dying up here. This audience is terrible.
It's hard to please,
so-
Mike.
It is. It is functionally impossible. I've never seen him smile. Right now, I can imagine his face right now, just perfectly like... He looks like Olmec.
Yes, like an ancient statue.
Every time you think of Mike, I want you to think of Olmec from Legends of the Hidden Temple. You never saw him smile. It's the same deal. So we're going to start off this thing talking about the experiences that we had, not just ourselves, not our own experiences, but our shared experiences. The things that mattered to us a lot in the 2010s in video gaming. And we're going to start off by asking a very simple question. Hey, Shane, what's the best video game of the 2010s?
Oh, I didn't expect this question, but I have an answer. Dark Souls.
No, that's... What? No, ridiculous. It's Rocket League. Obviously, it's Rocket League.
Oh.
Mike, you have
That's
some
what I
feelings about Rocket League, right?
Yes, it's the best game of the decade for one. I think a lot has probably already been said about Rocket League, but
I do
man,
talk about
this
it.
game is good. I would say
It's-
like the best 5 minutes in gaming, maybe.
It's... I played a lot of video games this decade, and also just broadly in general in life. And I really think Rocket League is, like, consistently just the most fun. It's the most fun video game.
It's
we're
just
probably
such a good time.
We're probably going to talk quite a bit over the course of the list about all of the sort of the lofty things that video games can aspire to. But there's a lot to be said for a game that's just really goddamn fun. Like, consistently really, really fun. And I think Rocket League sits at the top of that particular pile of games.
I do think that's a good point. I think people love to talk about why this game meant so much more than just being a video game. But at the end of the day, it's about being fun. And I do agree. Rocket League is a lot of fun.
Yeah, Game of the Year
No one
lists
can
in
argue with
particular-
that.
Game of the Year lists in particular definitely have a tendency to lean toward, like, games with weighty narratives.
Yeah.
You don't see a lot of games on, especially like big outlet Game of the Year lists that are like, hey, this game has fun mechanics. This game was doing something exciting mechanically, or like, I was very pleased to see that Baba Is You did not get left off Game of the Year list, because that's exactly the kind of game that I think often gets snubbed in favor of like The Last of Us. So I wanted to make sure that we started off this list with just a pure ass video game. Like Rocket League. Another thing I really thought was important to get established here at the beginning of the list is that video games are really important to me. Obviously, anybody who's watching this already knows that. But part of the reason video games are really important to me is that I find it very difficult to connect with people. I have a lot of social anxiety, and also I hate everyone. So that makes it very difficult to like talk to people and make friends and stuff. But games are a good way. Games are really one of the only ways that I can consistently like make connections with other people. It helps so much. I'm overstating it a little bit, but it helps so much if I can just like sit down and play a game with someone, you know? So a lot of my really strong memories, a lot of my like really, really meaningful memories of games from this decade are that thing happening, me playing a game with people in multiplayer and forming some kind of social bond that I can then build a normal person social bond on top of. It's very difficult for me to just like make a friend, but I can definitely make a friend with like, hey, that's the guy who's the really good Rock Band bassist.
I definitely know what you mean.
So my first game here in the in my talking about how video games help me connect to people section is Rock Band. Rock Band is great. Everybody's played some Rock Band probably, or at least knows what it is. And I think Rock Band is definitely one of the most important games of the decade for me, because early in this decade, I moved away from home to a town that I had never been anywhere near before, like not even remotely near, to a strange city, in a house full of strangers, because, like, how am I going to be able to afford my own house, right? But a friend of mine, not even really, I would say like a friend of a friend, a guy I know through somebody, kindly offered to let me live in his house rent-free, because he did not have a room for me, so I was sleeping in the corner of a basement, and he felt I did not need to be charged rent for that. And Rock Band was kind of the way, to some extent, like Rock Band and some other games were kind of like the way that I got okay with the people in that house, the way that I got over my social terror and survived those couple of years. And Rock Band was really like the center of that. Also, Rock Band's really fun. It's just like a very good game, you know?
I'm a little sad it sort of supplanted DDR, but yeah, it's a great game.
I can hear that. I would definitely be in much better shape if people were still playing DDR instead of Rocket League.
I definitely remember sitting in my mom's basement with my friends from high school trying to finish like the 10-hour set or whatever, where it's just every song in the game. Yeah, that was always fun.
Yeah, we did that. We did that at Neil's place one time. We had people rotating in and off the instruments, and I did the first 5 hours.
Oh my god!
And then had to go ice my hand. That was a good time, man. Video games are real good. I don't know if anybody else likes video games here. I'm a big fan. So, in terms of that kind of stuff, video games helping to form connections with people, another game that I thought was really important to me this decade was Counter-Strike Go. I played a lot of CSGO. I don't think I've ever talked about that on the channel before, but I played a ton of CSGO. Was terrible at it the entire way through.
Still am.
But like, yeah, yes, absolutely. Oh, I'm sure I'm worse now because I haven't played it now in a couple of years. But like games like that make everybody take a different role, make everybody perform asymmetrical cooperation. I feel really strongly about it. I think that's a great way to get friendly with people. And Counter-Strike really helped me branch out into a wider group of friends. Partly, including you, Shane. That's sort of helped me get more comfortable with you.
I think the biggest thing that connected us early on was Counter-Strike. So a lot of my fond memories are like playing specifically with you. So that's pretty cool.
It's nice that you're able to form fond memories of losing games.
Oh, yeah. Well, you learn ways to cope with the losing, and then it's not so bad. I got back into it a little bit recently, but it's funny because there's always that like first time I can remember that never is as fun as now.
Yeah.
So, but I would have to say like, I think it's interesting. This isn't necessarily part of the subject, but the game that we played that was Counter-Strike was definitely not the game that came out in I think 2012. Like that game changed a lot over the course, and even now it's continued to change. But I think the essence of what that game is, of getting people to work together in that sort of way, that's what's so fun about it. So no matter how it changes, it's still really the same thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of multiplayer cooperative games where you're all functionally doing the same thing, just kind of next to each other.
Yeah.
And I like Counter-Strike a lot for the way that even though you are all doing the same thing in the sense that you are all grim military men walking around and shooting at people, like the having to cover each other as you move because you can't shoot very well while you're moving and stuff like that. The places where different people would have different roles from moment to moment and would have to support each other or you'd all die. It's like a really good way of tying people together.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you learn to trust people a lot, or to not trust certain people, and I think that helps you bond with people, which is fun.
Yes, I do know exactly who you're talking about. Hey, Mike, Did you
Yeah.
have any important multiplayer video game experiences this decade?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I would be remiss to not mention Rayman Origins. In particular, as one of the members of the aforementioned house, this is sort of, I think, the first thing that we ever played like really, really heavily together. Is that right?
Yeah, probably. And we played it all the way through. Did we do it in one session?
Oh, I don't know if it was. I don't. It couldn't have been more than 2. I'm pretty sure we sat down and got all the way to like the midpoint in one go at least.
Man, what a good game. I think Rayman Origins is still maybe my favorite platformer.
I played it solo, but I still had a lot of fun with it. So I can imagine the co-op mode is a ton of fun.
Yeah, it has that a little bit of that thing that you got from New Super Mario Brothers, where you can interfere with each other just enough that you got to think a little bit about what's going on. You can just outright troll people and like dunk them in lava, which is always a great time in a cooperative game.
Every once in a while, you'll both jump up to smack an enemy in the air, and one of you, will just get slapped out of the air.
That's the if a co-op game doesn't offer that, it doesn't feel like a co-op game to me, to be honest.
Yeah, I think a little bit of chaos is real good for the feeling.
Yeah.
It does erode some of that trust you were talking about.
That's okay. That's how you learn that like the world is a cruel place.
I
thought
think it
that
helps.
was going in a more inspirational direction.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
Well, the world in this case is so beautiful. Like this game is so pretty. And like it sounds fantastic. Like every time you get smacked into something, it makes a whole bunch of really satisfying noise. It's just a really great experience.
Yeah, the audio and the visuals. I'm a huge fan of both Rayman Origins and Rayman Legends. I think they're both gorgeous. They both have incredible sound work. They're both a ton of fun to play. But Origins is Legends is a little bit more sprawling. It has some of the kinds of stages that you see in Legends, or in Origins, but it also branches out into like there are some stealth levels and there's some stuff where you do a lot of backtracking. And I really like how tight the package of Origins is. That's not a good. I should have phrased that differently.
No.
Listen, you all know what I meant.
Yeah, I get the idea.
Who doesn't love a tight package from time to time?
That's what makes playing with friends even more fun.
There are some things you just can't do by yourself.
Okay.
So Shane, how about you? Do you have any other important multiplayer experiences of the decade?
Yes. Notably also with you. But interestingly enough, I think if you asked me before this point what would be my most important game for the decade, I would say Counter-Strike easily, without a doubt. Until I saw a YouTube video about a weird MMO, and I am not an MMO guy, called ArcheAge. And ArcheAge I have so many mixed feelings about, especially because I think the people who run the game didn't do a very good job of maintaining it. But that being said, I think the thing that ArcheAge is, which is I think a little hard to explain, is one of the coolest things I've ever experienced in a game. I think you might do a better job of actually explaining what it is.
Well, it's an MMO, but it's an Asian style MMO rather than like the MMOs that are made in the West are a little bit less gacha, in the sense like obviously they want you to spend money. Everybody who is selling you video games wants you to spend money on their video games. But in my experience, the MMOs that are coming out of like Korea and China have a tendency to be more, first of all, more loot boxy, and secondly, to have more features that you have to buy into. And ArcheAge is very much one of those. I would say that it has a very like Korean MMO design sensibility. So I was not actually expecting to like it. I've played a couple of those, and they're usually very grindy, and I figured I'd play this for a little while because my friends were playing it, and then I'd bounce off of it, and I'd get back to whatever else it was that I was doing, probably World of Warcraft. But it was really something, actually. I ended up digging in real deep here.
I think the story that I always tell to people is so the game is a lot more about like open world PvP, which I think is a claim a lot of MMOs make and then never really are. But I definitely think that in this case it was true. And we were in one of like the biggest, me and SB were in one of the biggest guilds on our server. And there's a giant kraken in the ocean. And if you kill the kraken, you can sell its body for a lot of gold. So the other faction had a huge guild, like way more enormous than anything on our faction. So eventually the three big guilds on our faction teamed up to work together to try and take down the kraken, which is not something that had ever happened because all three of those guilds hated each other. And that's the only time I ever stayed up till like 6 a.m. and it was doing a giant like ocean battle against 1,000 other people. It was probably the craziest thing I've ever experienced. So
yeah, I play a lot of multiplayer. I play a lot of MMO type games, sort of as single player games that other people are present for. And like my favorite thing about MMOs is definitely raiding, which is a deeply multiplayer experience. But you don't spend most of your time, even if you are a dedicated raider, you don't spend most of your time raiding. You spend most of your time doing prep work for the raid, right? Like during Burning Crusade, I spent probably literally thousands of hours fishing. Just sitting there and fishing in that little Arakoa village, because that's where all the goldfish were. Goldfish are very rare in Outland for some reason. But yeah, like the thing that was kind of magical about ArcheAge is the way that it forced you together with other people with like some really, really compelling systems design. Like the primary way of making money in ArcheAge, to even be able to afford like the huge boats and stuff that you would need for those sea battles, was running trade packs from place to place. You would make trade packs out of materials that were available in one part of the world, and then you would have to move them to another city in order to sell them to an NPC to make decent money. And each trade pack had a different price in each city, and the further away you had to go and the more dangerous territory you had to go through, the more you were going to get paid for the route. So if you killed somebody who was carrying a trade pack, their trade pack just dropped on the ground, and you could take it. So the core economy of the game is very PvP based, and you would get like groups of your friends together. You'd be like, okay, well, this guy, George, was able to put together enough money to buy a small cart. So we're going to load some trade packs into his cart, and then we're going to ride alongside on our horses. And if we get jumped by a bunch of like brigands on the road, which would not be NPCs, but other angry players trying to steal your stuff, you have to like... I am not a big fan of jumping people in the world in MMOs, generally. It's a thing that sucks in World of Warcraft, right? Mm-hmm. Like, nobody benefits from world PvP. It's just a thing you do to be a dick to someone else. But ArcheAge made it really compelling and gave you a really compelling reason to always be playing with someone else, even sometimes people that you were maybe not huge fans of, because you kind of undersold it when you said that the guilds on our server hated each other. I also didn't like almost all the people in our guild.
Okay, yeah, you're not wrong.
But like being forced to band together by circumstance was still a compelling experience.
Yeah.
These are the sorts of stories that make me wish I could stomach playing EVE Online, which is really a thing I would rather hear about than actually do.
Yep, right there with you.
Yeah, no, exact same boat, where every time I hear about it, it sounds so cool. But, man, EVE Online. Shout out to people who like EVE Online.
Absolutely. Such cool stories come out of that game. It sounds like an absolute nightmare to play.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, we got one more game on our sort of loose outline here of great multiplayer games, important multiplayer games, because all of these objectively are important, of course. Tekken 7 came out this decade. Yo, I love Tekken.
So good.
I haven't played a Tekken game seriously in a very long time. I just don't play fighting games. But Tekken 7 came out and somehow it got into my sphere. You know what it was? It was Evo. I know a lot of people who play video games, and so I know people who talk about Evo every year. But the amount of hype around Tekken at Evo the past couple of years has been completely impossible to ignore for me. And so I think it was Evo maybe 2017, where Lil Majin had that run up to like third place.
Yeah.
Everybody that I was following on Twitter was talking about it. Everybody that I follow on other media was talking about how dope the Tekken series is. And so I started watching that, and that right there Lil Majin sold me on Tekken 7. He got me back into fighting games with that run, and a non-zero part of it had to do with the fact that he was playing King. Is King the greatest character in fighting game history? Is King the most important character of the decade?
Might be an agree to disagree scenario. I get why you like him. He's maybe less fun to be on the receiving end.
I know that.
A thing I really like about King, and this is not a thing that's unique to Tekken. We'll talk about what's unique to Tekken in a second here. A thing I really love about King, though, I love this character in every fighting game, is he has 10,000 moves. His actual command list in the training mode is like 190 moves or something, and almost all of them are terrible in all but one situation. And so you have this big Swiss Army knife of tools, and you just have to always know ahead of time which one you're gonna need to do.
Tekken definitely. I think it makes the game a lot more complicated to learn, but it does the thing that I really enjoy, where like they try really hard to make a lot of the characters play really differently. Because I've definitely played fighting games where you switch from one character to another, and it feels like, okay, there's a couple of things that make this character different, but not a lot. And that's
Dead or Alive kind of feels that way to me.
Mm-hmm. Tekken definitely does not feel like that.
Well, it depends. If you play Mishima's like I do, there's a certain amount of carryover between the characters.
Okay.
Everybody's got to win Godfist, etc. Sort of like the Kenryu kind of characters.
Yeah, there are a couple of good like mechanical lines like that you can bounce from one character to another. The Sway characters have some similarities and stuff, but like overall, yeah, I think Tekken does a fantastic job of differentiating the characters, which is a big part of its appeal to me. But also, it's just like it looks and feels good. I don't know enough about fighting games to even begin to try to quantify what it is about Tekken that feels so damn good to play, but it feels so damn good to play.
And at the end of the day, that's all that matters. Who cares?
That's right. At the end of the day, my opinion about how fun it is all that matters. I'm glad that you said it. I didn't want to have to say it.
It sort of captures the thing that's fun from like Tekken Tag Tournament, which I think is speed. I think it's sort of a fast Tekken game. I don't know. This is the thing that got me back into fighting games. I actually watched like a tournament of this, which is not something that I've ever done before. It's very compelling.
That might actually be part of it. That's probably something we're going to come upon a couple of times during this list. Tekken is a fantastic spectator game.
Yeah.
It's probably the case that...
I was going to say it helps that there have been such crazy stories recently.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's got like a sort of a metagame element that is fascinating to follow along, which helps keep it in your brain long enough for you to go, you know what, it's on sale. I may as well just pull the trigger.
Yeah.
That slow-mo before the final hit too. Like
that's
it's the little things.
Brilliant. All right, so we're gonna move on to some other kinds of games here, but before we do, I just want to say a quick shout out, and this is probably going to happen a couple of times, to other games that were really important to helping me connect with people this decade. I would not want to talk about the important multiplayer games of the decade without mentioning the guys over at Jackbox Games, who are producing some of the coolest stuff anywhere, I think. It's the coolest stuff anywhere that is happening anywhere in the industry. The whole Jackbox, everybody's a player, just get your phone out thing is so good for playing a game with totally new people who are maybe not even into games. Maybe this is a problem other people don't have, because other people can just like talk to a stranger. But for me, it's very helpful to have something like Jackbox where like you can meet somebody and just be like, there's a pretty good chance this person has a phone on them. Let's play Jackbox.
Yeah. And they're just all so good.
They are. I think there was a rash of imitators shortly after, so like somewhere around the time Jackbox 2 came out, which presumably is people who played Jackbox 1 and then went, oh, I could do that. And none of those games worked. None of those games were functional at all, and not in a technical sense, but it's the writing. It turns out these games are very, very difficult to write well, and the people at Jackbox are consistently nailing that out of the park every single time.
Yeah, I can't. There are huge gaps between those games, like a lot more than you'd think. Especially, I guess, not in a mean way, I guess, but for what it is technically, right? but you can
Sure,
tell
yeah, I
that's
get what
because
you're
they're putting a lot of work into making sure it plays as good as it can, and that's awesome.
I bet there is a terrifying number of discarded jokes and prompts per game. Like the amount of work they do and then throw away, I bet is absolutely huge.
Yeah.
All right.
Imagine
If we're
throwing
talking
away all that writing. Okay.
Yeah, I get a little bit of anxiety just thinking about it. So, if we're talking about important video game experiences of the last decade, I don't know how I could not talk about the thing that we're doing right now, the thing that everybody is seeing this particular video on. Although I guess listening, because probably there's not a lot happening on the screen right now. There's like a 90% chance that this is playing over a couple hours of Mike and I playing Rocket League together. I had a couple of people ask me. I did a few like confessional type videos and talking about stuff, and I just left the screen black because that's not video game related really. And I had a couple of people say, "Hey, could you just put something on the screen?" And so it's been Rocket League every single time since. It's just been Rocket League.
Us getting bodied in Rocket League.
Yes, every once in a sometimes we win. We're playing against the game has adjusted to how bad we are and is putting us against other bad people so that we can sometimes win.
Still best game of the decade though.
It really is. And it's remarkable how it's able to find people who are bad enough for us to play against. It's truly a feat of engineering.
I will say it's a good thing when you can generally come out as the loser and still find the game so fun you would want to put it on your games of the decade list.
Yeah, it's hard to even think about the game in terms of full games of it because the moment to moment gameplay experience is so good.
Right.
Like when I think about Rocket League, I think about the feeling of flipping off of the wall and knocking the ball down in such a way that it lands right in front of the defender and then bounces over him into the goal. And like, oh my god, I've done that hundreds of times at this point, and every single time it feels incredible. I'm getting distracted. I was going somewhere.
YouTube.
So I do want to talk. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the games that made this YouTube thing possible. Because those are going to forever hold a special place in my brain. And most of them are games that I would just say, like this is one of the greatest games of the decade. People who are listening to this, who are familiar with my channel, Endless Legend's coming. Don't worry, I'm going to talk about it. But first, I got to talk about Payday 2. I don't know. Hold on a second. I'm going to see real quick. How many hours of Payday 2 do I have logged on Steam? Who wants to guess?
150, 200? I don't know. Never mind. There's no way I'm right.
I think it's at least 1,000.
Okay, it is 945.
Okay.
Shane, you got prices rated right out of here. That's embarrassing for you. I've played a huge amount of Payday 2. I'm sure that I haven't actually played 945 hours. Some of that is the menu. But I've played a huge amount of Payday 2. And Payday 2, although it is not a thing that I've really done like content for on the channel, Payday 2 is the reason this whole thing exists in the first place, actually. So when Payday 2 came out, the thing that really got me into it was this idea of a big elaborate secret. There was in Payday 1, and I did not hear about it at the time, I heard about it in the run-up to Payday 2. There was in Payday 1 an incredibly elaborate secret called the Overdrill. It was a whole ARG thing. There were like dozens of weird, obscure clues that had to be put together, and you can go, I'm not going to try to tell the whole story. You can feel free to go and research this yourself. It's a really cool story. They put a super cool puzzle in the game, and it ended with, if you figured out all the parts and everything and how to activate it, it ended with an extremely difficult gameplay challenge where you had to like defend a bank vault against infinite waves of police for, I think, 2 hours or something. And then if you made it through the 2 hours, it let you into this room. Yeah, imagine being one of these guys. So you've been working on this puzzle for literally months. You finally figure it out. You do the thing in-game, and you're like, oh my god, we've cracked it. We get to apply the big drill to the door. And then you hook it up, and the little screen on the drill says, 2,000 seconds remaining, or whatever. And you take a moment, and you gird yourself, and you fight police for 2 hours. Limited medical supplies, limited ammunition. At some point, you're scavenging, just like living off of what you can take off of the enemies that you kill. You finally get through it, and then it dumps you into this room in front of a big door. And there's all these tiles on the floor, these like diamond-shaped tiles, and they're lit up. And once you're in there, you can touch any of the tiles. and if you touch the wrong one, the room fills with poison gas and becomes impassable and you lose.
Oh my god.
I would have to do it all over again to try again. And there's a pattern of 6 diamonds that have to be pressed in a specific order in order to gain access to the room beyond. And I heard about that, and I was like, well, I want to be part of whatever those guys are doing next. That's awesome. So they, as an early access incentive for Payday 2, people who bought the game before proper release got access to this PDF file they put out called The Guide of Bane. Bane is a character in the game story. It doesn't really matter who he is. But it's a book full of cryptic riddles, these illustrations that are very strange but contain a bunch of references to like the tarot and alchemical symbols and stuff. And it's like pretty clear that this is them putting together another big thing, right? There's some kind of thing hidden in this 20 pages or something of bizarre cryptic garbage. So, me being me, I did the thing that you would expect me to do. I spent hours and hours trying to decode this stuff, figuring out what in each image might refer to a thing from the game. I learned so much about alchemy for the purpose of this, alchemy and the tarot, and I was trying to explain my findings to people. But you know how it is with people in your life. You never have everybody together, right? So like I would explain what I was thinking about to Brian, and then later I'd have to explain it to Aaron, and I was like, this is... first of all, it's just a lot to say over and over again. And secondly, I could probably make this more efficient. So, I made some videos for YouTube. And I put them up on YouTube unlisted, and I posted a link in the Skype chat, the group Skype chat, because that's how old that was. How long ago that was. People were still using Skype for things. And people thought they were interesting. Our friends thought they were interesting, the 6 people who had access to them. And eventually somebody was like, hey, I wanted to watch one of those videos, but I couldn't find it on YouTube. Is it not, like, I searched it and it wasn't there. Did you take it down? And I was like, well, no, they're just there. I didn't post them publicly because I didn't want strangers to see them because I'm embarrassed of everything that I do. And but for you, okay, who cares, right? I'll just set it public. It's not like anybody else is ever going to see it anyway. 2 of those 3 videos are still amongst the most viewed things on the channel to this day. Somehow, I don't know, somebody saw it and then posted it on a subreddit somewhere, and it blew up, and I got a whole bunch of subscribers and stuff, and without that having happened, I never would have thought to try doing Let's Plays, because, like, the thing that I know about YouTube is that it's impossible to get past, like, those first 10 subscribers, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you are making content just out into the void, nobody's paying attention, and the fact that nobody's paying attention makes it impossible for new people to see it. So you languish down there forever. But Payday 2 somehow, accidentally, turned into a big deal for me and made this whole thing possible. So I feel like it would be disingenuous not to include it on a list of the most important gaming experiences I had in the 2010s. It, like, kind of literally changed my life.
I remember having conversations about what comes after this Payday 2 thing, which I heard about at length. Unfortunately, it doesn't really resolve in anything, right?
People who know me are used to hearing about things at length from me. No, it wasn't anything. There was no secret. It was all a head fake. Here's the thing. The people who worked on the game while it was coming up to release, a bunch of the creative leads left not that long after release. So I don't want to say for sure that they never planned to do anything with the Guide of Bane, but the people who would have done something left, and so there ended up not being a Payday 2 secret for a very long time, until actually very, very recently, like last year, I think, they finally put in, it might have been the year before, but they finally like put in an elaborate secret, but it's totally different and has nothing to do with any of the clues that we were given on release or anything. It did feel like kind of an appropriate way, though, to close out the decade. Some friends and I finally did the Payday 2 secret, like, a couple days after Christmas.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't realize that.
It's fine. It's okay.
It's whatever.
I don't think that Payday 2 is one of the best games of the decade. I think it's fun. I think there's some cool depth to the skill trees, but also there's a bunch of fake bullshit decisions where, like, there are objectively terrible choices that you don't realize are terrible until you've used them a little bit. but it's important. It's meaningful to me, even though I don't think it's a great game.
Mm-hmm. It's actually funny because I'm pretty sure, I don't remember how I saw those videos, but I'm pretty sure those videos were the reason I wanted to start playing with you guys in Payday 2. I didn't really have any interest in the game before that.
You were probably in that Skype chat. That might be how.
No, I wasn't actually. So I found out about it afterwards, but
well, what the hell, Shane? Those weren't for you.
Yeah, I know.
What are you doing?
I'm one of the people who found it after you unlisted it. I didn't even know SP before. No.
There's someone I have to be friends with.
Anybody this weird and obsessive.
Well, I think it's funny because you say why would anyone watch this, but I'm pretty sure that's probably the video with the most comprehensive information about the secret.
It seems that it was.
Yeah. So.
And obviously, me now being on YouTube has completely changed my relationship to games. First of all, I used to love video games. I play so many more video games now because I'm effectively playing video games for a living, which is like a completely wild. Every time I hear myself say that out loud, I'm like, how could that possibly be the case? Probably without YouTube, I never would have discovered. I had played Endless Legend already, but probably without YouTube, I never would have like really dug into Endless Legend and understood it. And if we're just talking about what I think are the best games of the decade, which we intentionally didn't, because all that hierarchical nonsense, whatever. But Endless Legend would totally be a part of that hierarchical nonsense. Endless Legend is one of the best video games of all time. I'm staking it right now. I will fight anyone in this room about it. I'm in a room by myself. That's... Listen, I don't know how to fight. Endless Legend is... oh my god, it's the best. If you are listening to this recording right now and you have never played Endless Legend, you've never heard of Endless Legend, you don't know what Endless Legend is, boy, do I have some videos for you. Boy, do I have somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 videos for you.
Is it your longest running series?
It's not my longest running single... Actually, my longest running single series probably is one of the Endless Legend series, but I've done like 10 different series.
Right.
So it's not all together. It's not a Northern Lion Binding of Isaac thing. But
right.
Yeah, I've done a lot of it. It's definitely the thing I've done the most of on the channel. It is the best 4X game. I still... that's maybe a little unfair. Endless Space 2 is also extremely good. The problem that I have with declaring Endless Space 2 to be the best is that I think mostly people play these games single player, and Endless Space 2's AI is a little bit overwhelmed by the complexity of the game. It has so many really, really cool systems that the AI just cannot manage at all. And so it always, even on the highest difficulty, it feels like the AI is desperately struggling to keep up with the 100 vectors of attack you have access to. But Endless Legend hits the sweet spot for like the systems being complicated enough for them to be interesting to a player and to produce real decisions, as opposed to like what I'd term fake decisions where there's one choice that's always wrong. In Endless Legend, your decisions are like legitimately different from game to game because context matters so much and the options are close enough to each other in value. And the art is incredible. There's a real like handcrafted wargaming terrain aesthetic to it that I think is just lovely. The music is extraordinary. The music in the Endless games, all of them, is really, really great. I love Endless Legend, you guys. I love it so much.
I would not want to write the AI that has to play that game.
No, absolutely not. 4X games, like the decision space is large enough that even though you could even though it is probably possible to put together a good AI for a 4X game, I wouldn't want to like. I'm sure it's very expensive and a lot of man hours.
Yeah.
I do want to say, though, a shout out real quick again before we leave Endless Legend, an additional shout out to Leader Enemy Boss of the Endless Legend community patch. If you're going to play Endless Legend, that's the way to do it. Get that community patch. That guy improved the base game AI considerably to the point where I cannot win games on the highest difficulty anymore.
Wow.
Which is, I think, that's as much of a standing ovation to it as I can give. It's now too hard for me.
I had trouble with the base game on the regular settings, but it is a little tough.
It is.
But
it is. Endless Legend is definitely harder.
Crunchy.
Yeah, it's definitely harder than like Civ, for example.
I would say if I'm a bad at Counter-Strike, I'm like a vegetable when it comes to 4X games. So
it's a lot of math, you know. There's no
Yeah.
execution. It's all math.
yeah.
And then YouTube is responsible for not just increasing the number of games I play, but also like helping me find different kinds of games that I might not have played otherwise. When I started the YouTube channel, actually what I was trying to do was less of a let's play thing and more of a making tutorials for people thing. And you can see that in like the very first Darkest Dungeon series I did. Do not go watch the first Darkest Dungeon series I did. The audio quality is horrible. I did not know how to use the equipment. Things have gotten better marginally since, but it's real rough at the beginning. But honestly, the reason I started doing Let's Plays was because people were being really shitty about the Corpse and Hound update in the Steam forums for Darkest Dungeon. Back when it was in early access, they made an update that overhauled a significant number of the game's systems and took a bunch of the classes from useless to extremely viable. Like, they did a huge balance pass and changed some stuff in a way that makes almost all of the classes useful and interesting, and people were so mad that the one strategy that they could use to defeat every encounter was no longer working. And they were like, this game is broken, you ruined it. So basically I started doing Let's Plays out of spite to prove those people wrong. I was like, we're going to use every class, we're going to do all the things, and we're going to show you that it all works and it's way better than it was before. Which is probably partially contributes to that not being a great series, because spite is not a good motivation for doing things.
This is the bodies stay on the floor update. What a good design decision.
Yeah, right?
So there's a GDC talk one of the developers of Darkest Dungeon did about exactly that thing, and it's super interesting. And I just wanted to mention it because people should watch it if they're interested at all.
I'm familiar with the talk you're talking about, and I also would recommend it to anybody who's interested in game design.
I would not want to release a game in early access after having watched that.
Oh yeah, what a terrifying process.
Yeah. But I mean, it worked out in the end for them, right? So that's a good thing.
So one more game I want to call out before we move off of talking about YouTube, me and YouTube, is Duskers. Duskers is a strange little game, and if we were talking about my top X games of the decade, there's a non-zero chance Duskers makes it up there. I think there's nothing else quite like it. But one of the reasons that Duskers is really important to me is that it's the kind of game I might never even have noticed if I wasn't specifically looking for stuff to do on YouTube, and it's one of the first games, it's maybe the first game I played on YouTube where I had not played it previously. I was running out of games pretty quickly, games where I felt like I was authoritative enough to be giving tutorials, to be laying out lessons for people. And so Duskers was like the game that taught me that it was going to be okay for me to model learning rather than model teaching, which I think has sort of become the center of the philosophy of the whole thing I do at this point. It is way, way more about learning and failing and learning and getting better, and especially failing. Super about failing. And Duskers is a great game for that, because it kills you all the time.
This is that like a great example of what I love about indie games, because it's like the heart of Duskers is like that feeling where you're in the dark, and you got an open room behind you and you're just like typing on a console, and it's like, boy, I heard a noise, what was that? Except like if in order to save yourself you had to type a string of commands in order to not die, which is a really
Quickly
great
and
horror
with no
experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think Duskers is a game that is fundamentally about being alone as the universe slowly dies around you, in a way that you couldn't make a AAA game that's about that because it's such an unpleasant theme. Duskers is a game that's aimed at a very narrow group of people.
I think the most interesting part, I'm sure most people would say this, about indie games getting as popular as they are is there are just so many things AAA will never do. And for good reason. Don't get me wrong. I totally don't blame them. But then you get these experiences that are aimed at 1% of the gaming population, and it's really cool, especially when you're in that 1%, right?
Yeah, because I think that's what we're talking about here, right? The cool experiences that you can have with a thing, and it's so much harder to have, in my experience, so much harder to have a really cool experience with a thing that is sort of aimed at a really broad audience.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just me, but I definitely respond to stuff that is weirder and more unpleasant.
That's probably
which is
fair.
maybe a bad place for me to go, because the last thing I want to talk about here before we move on, in terms of like helping me to find the version of the channel that exists now and helping me to find the host for it that I could be, is Renowned Explorers, which is really not an unpleasant. It's not a grim, unpleasant experience at all, but it is a very mathy experience. So I guess that sort of is still in that wheelhouse. There's a lot of people who feel that way about having to do math in their free time.
Yeah, that is true.
But yeah, like Renowned Explorers it's just delightful. It's a game that is resoundingly pleasant. Again, if you like to do a lot of simple math real fast.
A lot of people having confused responses to this line of reasoning.
I wanted to make sure. I did not want to miss out on talking about it. I think Renowned Explorers and Abby's other game, Reus, are both really remarkable games. Just an absolute delight to play, so relaxing, and also like really important to the existence of my YouTube channel as a whole. And I was very sad to hear that they're having problems and they have had to scale down the studio. As they're working on their new game, Godhood, which is out in early access and is very cool. And go check it out and maybe spend some money and help out some people who deserve to be helped out.
I think the series I've actually watched the most on your channel is Renowned Explorers. It's a very nice game to watch.
Yeah, it's just like pleasant, right?
Yeah.
It's very much the opposite of Duskers.
Yes.
Which I only played because you were doing it.
Look at what an influencer I am. Look at how much influence I'm doing. Hey, all game developers, look at it. Look at it and send me codes.
Part of the reason I was interested in doing this whole thing in general is like, I think the best way to learn new things that you enjoy is to talk to people, and I didn't even think about it, but you're right. Having a YouTube channel or having some social media like that, where you're sort of making content for people, it makes you look for things that you never would have looked for before, and
yeah,
that's a pretty cool thing.
How has that thing affected your life, Shane?
Yeah, so it's not clear maybe, but I'm sure people know. No, I have a Twitch channel. I've streamed a lot less, but around the same exact time that SB started his YouTube channel, I started streaming on Twitch about 3 times a week. So I sort of made a schedule out of it. And I would have never expected it to have as much of an impact as it did. But it's kind of a crazy thing.
Shane,
I would say that, yeah.
Shane, I respect what you're doing, but just plug your thing.
Oh, follow me at twitch.tv/Shaforny. Thanks. You can put the link in the description. I'm not going to spell it out.
Yeah, I got it.
I know it's a terrible name. Okay.
I know you, and I know that in the interest of not seeming self-serving, you never would have said the URL.
I actually forgot. I was on a train of thought and I forgot.
All right, sorry. Get back to it.
No, so I was going to mention, the original reason for me, and this may seem like a weird thing, but the original reason I decided that I was going to stream like that and I was going to commit to a schedule was because I've still kind of am a little bit, but I was kind of a flaky person and someone who had a lot of trouble making commitments. And I said, you know what, I'm going to pick something and I'm going to stick to it and I'm going to prove to myself that I can. And that was the thing I chose. And it's pretty funny because I think for about 6 or 7 months, I streamed to an audience of like 3 people. And when I say audience, I mean, one of those people was the Twitch bot I had. And then the other one was usually someone I knew, right? And so that went on for a while. And I made some friends. I met some people who would occasionally pop in, but it was never anything big. Until I played a game called Clustertruck. And well, it sounds like I'm only talking about it because it had an impact on my channel. It's not the only reason. Clustertruck's actually a really awesome game. It's not necessarily the type of game SB would play on his channel, but it's a lot of fun. I think in the same way that Rocket League is a lot of just, I'd say dumb fun, but I don't mean it in a negative way.
I think it's clear what you mean, though.
Right.
Well, I think it's clear what you mean.
SB, you're dumb. That's it. That's why I came here.
My feelings.
So, but Clustertruck was a fun game and a fun experience, but the people who develop it, Landfall Games, are actually real cool people. And one thing they did is I had Twitch integration enabled, which meant that people could type commands in and they would make things happen in the game. And the developers actually put some Twitch integration stuff that only they could access. And so essentially they were able to come in and do a bunch of crazy stuff to my game. And after that happened, I was like, whoa, that was awesome. And I uploaded it to YouTube. And, you know, I didn't really put a lot of things on my YouTube, but after like a month or two, suddenly that went from like 1,000 views to like 10,000 views and eventually 100,000 views. And I was like, wow, this is absolutely insane. And some of those people followed me on Twitch. And I think now it has 3 million views, which is absolutely absurd. But the cool thing about that whole thing was I went from having 3 people watching me on Twitch to, during the period of growth that happened, about 30 people. And now when I stream, like maybe 10 or 15, but that's an amazing thing to me, to suddenly go from no one cares to having an audience. I mean, it's like SB said, the Payday videos meant a lot to him because they made such a big difference in terms of starting a YouTube channel, and it was sort of the same thing.
Yeah, so, like it's something that kind of like comes out of nowhere and makes a whole different version of your life possible.
Right. Yeah.
It's sort of the weird magic of the internet, I guess.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I do some speed running, and I've met people through that community, and I've had some of them say, wait, I know your name. I saw your Clustertruck video. And so in some places there's a bit of a joke that I'm the Clustertruck guy now, but I don't mind that too much. So yeah.
Do you have a world record on Clustertruck?
I don't. I haven't speedrun Clustertruck.
It's 3 million views.
Yeah, my world record is 3 million views.
That's pretty good. That's probably pretty far up there.
I bet. Yeah, that's still really weird to me, to even think that I've posted something on the internet. I don't think I deserve 3 million views for that video, but you know, here we are now. So
yeah, that's sort of the thing about YouTube. You don't get to decide who deserves what. It just happens.
Right. Yeah. That's the algorithm decides. So, but speaking of kind of, I'm terrible at transitions. Okay. Speaking of meeting people through something like this, it's actually surprising to me how I've personally made some really good friends through Twitch. And that's not something I would ever expect. I had no idea how much I would interact with a quote-unquote audience or anything like that. But some of my closest friends now are people I met through my channel, and they were really cool people, and they stuck around, and eventually we got close to each other. And so there's like a couple of games that stand out to me specifically from this past decade, like Terraria and Grand Theft Auto 5, which I think both aren't games I would have put on my game of the decade, but I've probably streamed like 80 to 100 hours of Grand Theft Auto 5 playing with 4 of my friends, one of whom I met through my stream, and another I met on Halo 3, and then he found me again because I was streaming, or because of the Clustertruck video or something.
Star-crossed gamers.
Yeah, you know, the world works in strange ways. That reminds me, I have a Halo 3 video on an old channel that has like 100,000 views. That's pretty funny.
I've seen that video because you said something about it once, and I went and looked it up.
It's pretty funny. So, and Oh, you know what? I didn't write this down, but I guess the game that stands out the most to me from my stream now is what is it called?
Really does stand out, huh?
We Happy Few.
Okay.
Because I was a very opportunistic person. Obviously, this is what you do when you have a channel, and SB can't lie about this. Is you look on the Steam page, the Steam store, and you look around and you're like, God, what do people want to see? Like maybe there's a game that nobody wants to buy, but a lot of people want to see. And this was right when We Happy Few came out in early access. And I was like, no one's gonna take the risk of buying this and streaming it. Like it's less likely, right? But people are gonna be looking at people playing this. So I decided to buy the game, and I think that's actually I hit like 50 viewers that stream, and that was the most viewers I've ever had. But specifically, I had someone in my chat who is currently in the room with me, being very quiet so we can record this. Because I played that game, she clicked on my stream, and eventually we became closer and closer, and now we're dating. So it's hard for me not to think of We Happy Few when I think of this decade, because I guess it got me my girlfriend.
I was wondering if you were going to mention that. I didn't want to blow up your spot if you were trying to keep it quiet, but I was like, hey, that seems like it should be important.
I think Andrew at one point joked around that I was streaming just to meet a girl on the internet, and that I was going to quit streaming. And a couple months after I started dating Allison, I stopped using my schedule. So I don't know. Maybe he's not wrong.
Cassandra over here.
He knew better. He knew better than any of us.
Yeah. So
I tried to get this particular mutual friend of ours to be on this thing, and he told me, No, I can't do a thing like that. I got a life, SB. I'm far too busy. Right now, he's playing Monster Hunter World. I feel so betrayed.
He could have talked about Monster Hunter World right here, right now.
I would have talked over him a lot, but he could have tried. So it's been a big decade for the way that the internet has changed the way that we engage with video games. And by we, of course, I mean me and Shane. Because nobody cares about anything that Mike's doing. But Mike, for the sake of completeness, why don't you tell us how has this decade changed the way that you engage with video games?
Sure. I don't have a great social media presence, but nobody's dropped in anything I've done. 3 million people watched it happen later. But it's sort of hard for me to talk about the best things, my best games or maybe people will feel game adjacent experiences are this decade without talking about game jams. I think a game jam, like sitting down for a weekend with some friends and like building a game from scratch, is like a really satisfying and important experience for me. And this particular decade, boy, I think we did a jam at one point where we had 13 people working on a game for over the course of 3 days.
That's insane.
Yeah, if anybody who's actually ever done any programming work or coordination realizes that 13 chefs is not really a great way to get a fantastic output normally. But it does turn out that practice makes perfect. Since these are all not things that I think anyone is gonna probably play or maybe even be interested in playing, I think that the most interesting one that we probably did was for Ludum Dare 45, which was the Jesus Take the Wheel game. But there's been a bunch of other ones, and I think that if you've ever thought about, hey, maybe I want to make video games, or this is interesting, I really suggest just like doing a Ludum Dare or a global game jam, and just getting together with some like-minded people and actually trying the process of building it, out for just a couple of days, see how it fits.
Yeah, in a nice contained way that has a definite ending. I think that anybody who is into video games, even if you don't think that you would necessarily like to develop them on your own, like it helps give you so much perspective about the things that you do play on a daily basis. Once you've been on the inside of the sausage factory a little bit, so to speak.
Inside of the sausage factory, yeah. Me and me and Mike have done the past 2 global game jams together alongside other people. But the first global game jam we did 2 years ago, that was like 4 or 5 months after I learned how to code. And when I say learned how to code, I mean I knew nothing still, obviously. I still know nothing. But you know, I was still there and I was still able to help. And that to me was like a really eye-opening experience where it's like, oh wow, you know, I can still contribute something even if I suck at this thing. And that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was a really great playtest too. We player tower defense game, and I would say that in that context, I was having as much fun doing that and seeing people play it as you know, a good night of Rocket League.
Yeah, I will say, if you're interested in doing a game jam, I don't mean to take the light from you, Mike, but the global game jam or something that's physical is a really good idea, especially if people go around and playtest. Because seeing people playtest the Tower Traders game we made was like the most amazing thing. Some people sat down and played it more than once. And to me, that's better than I'll ever do ever again. So,
I mean, we had only spent 2 days on it, and they're like, "Yeah, I'll play this a second."
Yeah, that's amazing. You can make something like that. Yeah,
you peaked. It's all downhill from here.
I'm going to lay down in my coffin now.
3 million views, and they played it twice. Put it on my tombstone.
I'll be in the history books. Yeah, where will you be? No, for real though, if you have any interest at all, it's a really awesome thing. It's really cool to even see someone play a game you made once, let alone twice.
After that, it stops being special. 2 is really the magic number.
Yeah. Get away. Like, are you going to play it 3 times, really? Pathetic.
Let someone else play it twice.
I gotta leave the room. I can't handle this.
Don't hog the chair. I liked our most recent game jam game too. Sadly, you can't play that one. It only works in the Unity editor. I don't want to talk about it.
It's under time pressure.
Well, yeah, and that's sort of the magic of game jams, is that you're not trying to produce a thing that is polished or even really finished. It's like just a functional concept of an idea. It would be very difficult for every person who is even kind of interested in games to like make a full whole game. People may not realize what a huge amount of effort even a trivial video game is. But I think game jams are really cool for letting you get sort of like a slice of what the idea is like, but in a way that's not going to consume you for 6 months.
Yeah. It will consume you. Trust me. So, anyways, game of the decade, Tower Traders. It's been resolved.
Mike's game of the decade is the experience of making video games. He says it's as good as Rocket League. I don't know. That's hard to believe.
No, watching people enjoy it is as good as Rocket League.
Yeah.
The rest of it is
actually making the games is miserable. I love having made a game. I do not like making games.
It's a job for a reason.
It's really funny. The first game jam we did, the process was like, it started around 4 or 5 p.m., maybe 6 p.m. actually, and we brainstormed from then until 3 in the morning, and then we drove back to someone's apartment. We slept, and I think we woke up at 7, and then we said, screw this, and went back to bed until like 9, and I woke up and I still felt miserable. I felt the worst I had ever woken up in the past 5 years. And then we went there, and we started working, and it was okay again, and we went through the whole day, and it was 3 a.m. again, and we were like, wait, the game doesn't work, and we have to have it presentable by 3 p.m. tomorrow. And we went to the apartment, and that was the most demoralized I think I've ever felt in my entire life.
Every jam has a like valley of despair moment. I've done enough of them now. It's like clockwork, and you'll joke with me. Is this the worst we'll feel, you think? Or do you think it's gonna get worse than this?
We're really
you
selling
guys,
it. Well,
yeah, you guys are really driving this experience home for everybody. I mean, listen, it is like developing a full video game, just in micro.
So, but the moment where we got back Sunday, we hadn't had any sleep, and finally everything started to click and fit together, and the thing started working. that was the most relief I've ever felt my entire life. So
It's really very satisfying to
Yeah.
see it start come together. And like, hey, I did not have a game 24 hours ago, and I definitely didn't think we were gonna have 3 hours ago, but here it is.
it's something at least.
No,
Yeah.
it was, like I said, as good as Rocket League watching people play it.
Yeah, no, it's really awesome.
All right, that's not really a video game, though, Mike.
No.
You're kind of subverting the purpose of the whole thing here. Why don't you talk about a video game that was important to you this decade?
Yeah, I think I can think of a candidate. So without going into too much detail, I had a fairly mundane but fairly serious health scare, a couple of years ago, and I ended up an ambulance ended up getting called. I got taken out of the office in an ambulance, which is always a cool experience that you want your coworkers to have. And when I got back out of the hospital, that was right around when Hollow Knight had come out. And so, while I think Hollow Knight is just absolutely fantastic for a lot of reasons, it's very hard for me to kind of separate it from that, like, 6-8 week period after I was hospitalized, where Hollow Knight had come out. And boy, I just spent so much time playing that. It's a really great immersive experience. I think it's sort of a weird thing to say for a like a Metroidvania, like a 2D Metroidvania game. I don't think that's sort of classically what people think of, but the atmosphere is just fantastic. It's beautifully animated. It has, really, I think, pretty tight gameplay, and the developers, which I think is a real common problem. Maybe problem is not the right word for indie developers, where they made so much game. It's just like 20 hours longer than it should be for how much they charged. So yeah, I mean, Hollow Knight is sort of this fantastic sort of, I would say, maybe the best Dark Souls game that's not, explicitly like Dark Souls. I sometimes call it Bug Souls.
You are not the only person who does that. I have heard that other places.
No, but I like it every time I hear it. It makes me laugh. Yeah, no, Hollow Knight. I never thought about it, but Hollow Knight, I think, is the most immersive Metroidvania I've played. There's something about
You're
it.
right.
I couldn't say what it is.
You're right that people don't usually use the word immersive, especially like for pretty much for anything two-dimensional.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is an atmosphere to Hollow Knight that does sort of like creep up around you as you play.
Yeah, it kind of gets in your head. Hollow Knight is a mood, I guess, in the parlance of our times.
Is it a big mood? Is it a medium-sized mood? What do you think?
Oh no.
I think definitionally they're very tiny, right?
Yeah, fair enough. Hollow Knight is the tiniest mood I've ever played. I'm gonna be straight with you. I didn't really get it. It didn't work for me the way it worked for you, and that has itself been an experience. Being on the internet while not liking stuff is maybe the primary experience I used to have with video games. Because I don't know why, but like a lot of stuff that people dig just doesn't work for me. And I don't think Hollow Knight's a terrible game, but I have had to, on a number of occasions, break it to people that I'm not going to play Hollow Knight on the channel. I've had like a couple of people be really, like, multiple Reddit messages and stuff being like, hey, there's this game that came out. And I'm like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, I think I've 100%ed it twice. And that's the only game I've ever done that.
That's surprising. Hollow Knight, when you say, I think it goes a little too long for what it wants to do. I don't know if I would have fun 100%ing it, but I did have fun beating it, if that makes sense.
Fair enough. Heartbreaking.
It's not a bad
fair.
thing. It's not a bad thing. Like, this is the thing that's great, right? Is that we can have these different shades of how much people like the thing. And it's awesome that you can 100% that game and have it mean so much to you. And I can play through the whole thing and have it mean a lot, but say, you know what? I don't want to get 100% here. And I think not liking video games on the internet like SB, that's big mood. That's big mood.
That's a big, extremely common mood. Speaking of games that I'm happy that other people enjoy, Shane, do you want to talk about Dark Souls a little bit?
Yeah, this is interesting. So I don't have as compelling of a story as Mike, I don't think. Thanks a lot, Mike. You ruined
He's
my
a very
chances
compelling
here.
person.
You're welcome.
No, yeah. So I don't know if I would have liked Dark Souls if I played it at any other point in my life. That's a thing that's always very interesting to me. But I was in a real weird mindset. I was pretty depressed, and Dark Souls was a game that sort of spoke to me in a way that helped me get out of it, and that means a lot. It I'd never really played, so Dark Souls a lot of the time is said to sort of be like a callback to retro stuff where it's like really hard and you have to do things over and over again and keep trying to beat that boss or whatever. And I was old enough where I was young enough where I never really played that sort of stuff. So, I mean, I'm sure there are other games we'll talk about that are sort of in a similar vein. And it's not exactly retro, right? But it sort of fits that same niche, I think.
There are some design sensibilities that are retro.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, and I think really that game was able to help me feel better about overcoming obstacles. I used to be a person who got really frustrated with video games, actually. And it was the experience of learning how to play Dark Souls that helped me deal with that. And, the atmosphere and the setting and the story stuff that exists around it are all amazing. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to have anyone else like it as much as I do. So there's that.
It's certainly a game that an awful lot of people have positive feelings about, I think.
Oh yeah.
But you feel, for the record, you feel that all those people are enjoying it wrong, right?
No.
On the
internet. Oh God, I gotta leave. No, I do think a thing that annoys me generally is when people call something a Souls-like. The thing that I really liked about Dark Souls isn't coming out in that. It's not really about being super hard or having like bonfire-like checkpoints or anything like that. And I don't know if I could put into words what it is, but I don't feel like that does, especially the first Dark Souls, justice. So
we've had a couple of fairly long conversations about this. Do you mind if I try to take a stab at it here?
Sure.
I think that part of what you've expressed to me, I remember saying when you were trying to get me to see the thing that you like about Dark Souls, I remember expressing frustration that it's like a bad, slow Devil May Cry. And you, the way you recoiled from that statement, not just, hey, come on, you're not being fair, but fundamentally, that's not what we're talking about here. What are you saying? Made it, that helped to make it clear to me that it's not really even about the moment-to-moment gameplay so much. I think a lot of it, what you seem to dig about it is the indirectly told narrative, the way there's a story of a world in that game, but you have to dig for it.
Yeah, that is a big part of it, and there are a lot of games that have done that. I just think it's almost flawlessly done in Dark Souls 1, and that's amazing. There's so much stuff to uncover. I've played through that game so many times, and you still find new things, and that's really awesome. Yeah, that's a big part. And every time someone says a Souls-like, I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't have this part that matters so much to me, and I'm the only one on this earth that matters. So, yeah.
I think the way you talk about Dark Souls makes me wish that I liked the gameplay of Dark Souls enough to see it.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot get through the opening of that game.
Oh,
but
me neither.
The thing that you described to me is just super compelling. I'm really happy that you were able to have that experience.
We're still gonna have to one day do the thing where we sit down together and we play through it, regardless of if it's me playing through it and you watching. I don't care. Yeah.
That's fair enough. I actually would like to do that.
Okay.
So, speaking of narratives in video games, I think it's been a big decade for changing the way we think about narrative delivery in video games. Not necessarily that the stories we tell now are better than the stories that we used to tell, although I do also think that is true, but the way we tell them is getting better. Like, I've played a lot of video games, and I have fond memories of the stories in some of those games, but I think this decade, like, all of the best experiences I've ever had, like, getting a story from a game are from recent years.
Mm-hmm.
So are there any games, Shane, looking at this list where you have written down a game that you would like to speak to?
Yeah, I think this is the sort of game that talks to me maybe more than other people. So I don't know if this would be for everyone, but Night in the Woods is probably, in my opinion, the best. I guess unless we consider the narrative of Dark Souls, it's probably the best narrative I've played through in the past decade. And I think specifically what I like about it so much is it really speaks to it's really like a coming of age story in a lot of ways. It's about growing up and learning how to deal with the world, with as shitty as it is. And the thing I appreciate so much about Night in the Woods is it does all of that without saying, man, growing up sucks. The world's shitty, right? Like, I find a lot of video game writing is very hard. It finds it very hard to be subtle. And a lot of Night in the Woods is about telling a different story. It's telling a very literal story, but the real story it's telling is something you have to extract a bit more, and that's awesome. If you're not interested in playing through it, maybe check out a playthrough. I really loved it. It made me feel things that I can't explain. So definitely check it out. I don't know if you guys have played it at all. I don't think so.
I didn't finish it, but I feel like excuse me. I got to that scene where they go to the dying shopping and they're sort of recapturing their youth with the fountain.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of the thing that you're talking about. Maybe I'm off, but like I sort of had that experience and I was like, wow, that was really nice and affecting. And then I just never picked it up again. I guess maybe I got what I needed to out of it as like a narrative experience.
Yeah. No, I understand. Yeah. No, that definitely is the sort of thing. I want to go through it again. You can actually play through it and get different stories and stuff, so that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
But have you played it at all, SB?
I have not, but I'm glad that you were the one to broach the "it made me feel things I couldn't explain" thing, because now later when I say that, I'm not going to feel so weird. This is a thing I'm looking ahead at the list. It's a thing I'm going to say a couple more times here. So
I'm glad, but also, how dare you? No. It's an awesome game. Definitely check it out.
I like to use you as an emotional shield whenever possible.
That's how most people use me. Speaking of,
so I think part of what's cool about Night in the Woods is kind of what I was is one of the things I was talking about while trying to intro this section, is that it's not just that we tell different stories now. There's such a broader variety of stories available in video games now than there were in like 2009. You know, and in 2009, when would you say the sort of to use a very reductive term, the indie revolution really started? When was that?
That's a tough question. I don't know.
I would say it was Xbox Live Arcade.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's
like
a good answer.
Braid, and then maybe, well, Cave Story is maybe a little inside baseball, but it's like that, and then we get like our Braid and Xbox Live Arcade stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's not that long before the decade that we're talking about now, right? And there are a lot of video games that have a lot of stories in them, and I don't mean to be reductive, which I am being, but you know, we have a limited amount of time to talk here on Earth in a life. But there are a lot of video games that are telling like the same 3 or 4 stories over and over again with like the world-ending stakes and I really appreciate that we're in a place now where we can get games like Night in the Woods, which is just like a story about some stuff happening in a small town and a person sort of coming to terms with what their life is and the way their home has changed while they were away, and
Yeah, it's and I hadn't before that felt like a game sat down and like put their hand on my shoulder and went, "Hey man, I get it. It's okay." You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's a weird way to put it, but
no, that's a powerful experience to feel sort of like to feel seen in that way.
Yeah.
I think that this is not certainly the only powerful narrative experience of the decade, but I do notice the next game on our list here, as much as I think the narrative of it is very compelling, it is definitely a more like traditionally video gamey thing. Hey Mike, do you have some words to say about Portal 2?
Do I ever? So like Portal 2 is a puzzle game and whatever, but that doesn't really. I mean, like it's neat mechanically.
Clear, I do think it's a very good puzzle game.
It's really good.
It's great. I would say it's I hesitate to use the term master class, but it's really great at building up its mechanics and going through everything and being paced well and all this other stuff. But that's not really why I like it. I mean, it's great and all, but like Portal 2 has such a really compelling cast of characters. And I think Portal and Portal 2, I don't know that I had quite as seen characters in a video game, drawn this well, particularly humorously, except maybe outside of like the old LucasArts games or something, right? It's a little bit of a lost art. But like, most people who are familiar with games at least know about Gladys, and I think those Cave Johnson videos and stuff were really popular. J.K. Simmons just like chewing on the scenery and spitting it out, and then like chewing it again.
Well, he's got a big mouth. He can fit a lot in there at once. Side question, derailing. J.K. Simmons, is there a thing that he has not been great in? Can you think of one?
No, I can think of things that would have otherwise been bad that are elevated by his presence.
If he wasn't there, yeah, that's fair. It's magical. But, what a wonderful man.
I'm so glad he's involved in. But like with Portal 2, it's even like the little touches, like the cores and the companion cube, the turrets, the sort of haunting childlike turrets, asking where you went, like this is all just a game of very lethal hide and seek. It's atmospherically, the sort of the way it tells its story is all fantastic. I think it also has like the best achievement that's ever happened in gaming.
Yeah, one of the best like meta systems integration moments in any game ever. At the beginning of one of the chapters, you are lured into a trap by the enemy of the game, by your adversary Wheatley, and he says he's giving some grand speech, and it ends with him saying, "But this is the part where I kill you." And at that moment, the chapter heading comes up, and it says the part where he kills you, and also you get a Steam achievement. It pops up in the corner and says the part where he kills you, and then the description text for it is, "This is that part."
It's so funny that like anytime I see humorous text in an achievement or whatever, it's like, yeah, but it's no, this is that part.
Yeah.
It's funny enough that it worked. It made me laugh enough that I died. I failed to get out of the trap in time. Because he says that to you, and then he like slams a bunch of panels down where you are. If you don't get off of that spot pretty quickly, you do die. He got me. I'll say it right here and now. I'm not afraid to admit it in front of the internet. Wheatley is smarter than I am.
But it is really satisfying, the systems, especially the meta systems, which I don't think I had really seen you prior to this in a way that like kind of elevated the experience that was in the game rather than kind of as a extrinsic reward. That was pretty cool.
Are you talking there about the potato sack stuff, or?
Well, I think I suppose specifically like just in the context of this one one achievement. But yeah, you're right. There is a bunch of other Portal adjacent meta system stuff that was actually pretty compelling. Now that I'm thinking about it.
That's definitely like that's an inextricable part of Portal 2. That experience of playing Portal 2 for me is that prior to the game's release, so Portal was a big deal. When Portal came out, it was it hit big and it was talked about all over the internet. It was an incredible bundle that Valve put out called the Orange Box. It was TF2 and Half-Life 2 Episode 1 and Portal. Yeah. I think for like $20 or $30, which is just completely insane when you look at the quality of those games. It's really wild. But the way Valve announced that there was going to be a sequel is they patched a bunch of stuff into Portal. They're like radios that you can find in hidden areas and stuff, and they broadcast coded frequencies. You could decode the stuff. They tacked a small scene onto the end of the ending of Portal that suggests that something more is happening. And then there was this whole, once people started figuring it out, there was this whole big ARG that wove through 12 or 13 other video games, indie games that were out on Steam, like patched in secret levels and stuff where you could find hints about Portal 2 that led to unlocking this countdown timer, and there were things we could do, like as a community, we could do to make the game release earlier. So you had people like trying to get all these potato sack achievements. The group of games that had the Portal 2 content in them were called the Potato Sack, and they were made into like a reduced price bundle on Steam. And there was a cool week-long period of very heavy engagement with a game that had not yet come out. That sadly was capped off by the getting the game to release early thing not being as cool as anyone hoped. Because I really wanted it to come out while it was still the weekend. It turns out they weren't going to let us move it back that far.
Yeah.
Boy, I'm seeing a pattern here. It's like every time big ARG, it makes really compelling gameplay.
Yes, I love an elaborate puzzle. Just give me an elaborate puzzle. We're going to get to, soon enough, the games that are just elaborate puzzles. But I also love elaborate puzzles that are adjacent to games, just near a game.
I think it's worth shouting out here. I don't know how good the ARG is for it, but if you kind of find these sort of discovery experiences fun, I think like Frog Fractions, like that's the whole thing that Frog Fractions is. So I'm pretty sure the original Frog Fractions predates the 2009, but boy is that a trip. And also there was a sequel that came out this decade, which is...
The story of the weird thing they did up to the release of the sequel is definitely worth reading about. The whole Frog Fractions 2 is coming campaign. They did was it a Kickstarter to fund the development of Frog Fractions 2?
Yeah, I may have kickstarted that.
They told people that it was it would not be released as Frog Fractions 2. It would be released inside of another game, and nobody would be told. You would have to find it.
I went with there were several different options you could pick, and one of them, please send me an email once someone's publicly outed the game so that I can have it. Which is how I ended up discovering which game was Frog Fractions 2.
You had unplugged a little bit from the ARG, but one day you got an email that told you it had been solved.
Yeah, and what game it was, and I think it's cool that it happened, and I think that from a sort of sense of surprise, like going in blind to a Frog Fractions game kind of recaptures that pre-internet, game guide era of games a little bit.
Yeah, I could see that. I think that's probably part of what I find compelling about ARGs in general, is the way that everybody gets to work together and there's nobody in the room who already knows. That's such a rare thing anymore with the internet being the way it is. There's always someone around who already knows. You can't really work out the thing with people, but an ARG gives you that nice communal feeling of discovery.
I never thought about that. That's really cool.
That's how they baited me to buy Payday 2.
Well, but jokes on them. You got a channel out of it.
Yeah, I can't wait till I'm close to releasing my game, and I just make a dumb ARG, so SB will buy it.
So I'll post 100 excited, increasingly paranoid videos on my channel. Okay, no, this is what I think this means. I finally figured it out. So much free advertising. So, circling back around to the idea of games that people love but have a hard time putting into words their love for. I wanted to make sure I jammed this in. We talked about a bunch of different categories of ideas and experiences, and I couldn't really find a place to put this game because I can't even really verbalize the feeling that I have about it. But I need, in a deep primal way, to talk about Pyre, you guys. Pyre is the third game from Supergiant Games. Supergiant is responsible for a couple of indie titles that maybe you've heard of, perhaps Bastion, Transistor, and their new thing Hades, which extremely rules, completely and totally rules. But usually when I hear people talk about Supergiant, they're talking about it by saying, "Oh man, I loved Bastion. I loved Transistor." And then they made that game Pyre, and that was kind of whatever. I played a couple hours of it. I sort of bounced off of it, whatever. And then they're doing this new thing. Have you seen the new thing? But I don't know why.
Super guilty.
I don't know why. I don't know why why Pyre got into me so much, or why other people didn't get into it, or whatever. But Pyre is a thing that I think about, probably not every day, but probably every week. There's something about not just the mechanics, not just the narrative, but some kind of combination of those things about Pyre that really wormed its way into my heart. I think that, first of all, the series I did on YouTube about of Pyre is probably one of my favorite things I've ever done. Part of it is that's the first game I did that was just all reading. There are whole episodes of the Pyre series that are just an hour of me reading a book to you. And I was not sure that was going to land for people, but it really seemed to. There are some people who are so super down for story time with SB, and that has carried forward in a super fun way. There are games I would never have found without the confidence that Pyre gave me. Without that, I probably never would have played Sunless Skies on the channel, which means I probably never would have played Sunless Skies, and that's a thing I would have hated to miss out on. Well, no, if I'd missed out, I wouldn't have known. But you know what I mean. That's a thing that current me doesn't like the idea of having potentially missed out on. But I just think Pyre is an incredibly beautiful story. The way that success means losing people who are important to you because you're helping them move on to something better, and you have to make those choices in that moment. You've done the thing well enough that somebody gets to go back topside, and you have to make that call. There's something happening there that's beautiful in the way that you're helping them, but also heartbreaking in that now they're lost to you. And it really it touched me emotionally in a way that games generally don't, in a way that very few games have, but not in a way that I feel like I can really put into any kind of concise, precise words.
I feel you, man. It's hard sometimes.
Maybe this is why I bounced off of it, is I didn't have that bittersweet savior moment, probably because I'm really bad at Dota basketball.
Yeah, and to start getting that, you have to get pretty deep in the game. The first time you can send somebody back topside, I bet, is 15 hours in.
Oh, okay.
It might not be
the other reason.
It might not be that long, actually. It was that long for me, probably, but that's because I was reading everything that happens in the game out loud. If you're just reading it with your eyes like a normal person, it's probably a lot faster.
I didn't know a lot about Pyre, but now I'm actually really interested.
I would honestly say this is another one where if we were just doing a best games of the year, best games of the decade thing, Pyre's on my list, absolutely, certainly.
Gotcha. I think I might have. Go ahead. I don't want to interrupt.
Okay, one last thing about it. It is a beautiful thing. Also, their new game Hades is kind of a great thing. They're both on Steam, and I believe Pyre's pretty cheap. I'm just saying, go give Supergiant Games some money. They deserve it, and you will get a thing that is worth well more than the money you paid.
I was gonna mention, I've had this experience with a couple of games. Persona 4, I played at the start of the decade, and I got to the end, where I knew everything. I just had to beat the final dungeon, and I put the game down for like 4 or 5 months because I was so upset that I was going to finish it. And
yeah.
Yeah, I'm one of those people. And that makes me a little worried about playing Pyre, but
I've done that. I still haven't read Last Chance to See, because once I read it, I will have to live in a world where there is no more Douglas Adams for me to read, and I don't know that I can do it.
Yeah, no, it's like you invest so much of your life into this thing, and like, I don't know, the game took me 100 hours, but I don't put 100 hours into a game very often. And it's like, this is the end. There isn't more of this that I can get. You know, and I guess in some ways that's really awesome, and it shows that these things mean so much to us. So
yeah. So we probably have a couple of other games here worth talking about that have meant a lot to people here in sort of the same way.
Yeah. So I think much in the way that well, maybe much is overselling it, but in the way that like Night in the Woods sort of, I think, tells an ultimately like uplifting story about life. Celeste is example of a game where one of the things that I really like about it, and I think is, sort of sets it apart from the other games that it's similar to, is this narrative. Like Celeste, if you're not familiar with it, is like one of those sort of hard puzzle platformers, in the vein of Super Meat Boy, except instead of it being like a piece of meat slapping around on the walls at high speed and dying every 3 seconds, it, it's like about a woman climbing a mountain, and it's just this really great combination of the story is about overcoming depression and like proving to yourself that you can do something in a way that lines up with the game mechanics and experience that I think is obvious in retrospect, but kind of a shame that no one had really done it, I would say, before in a game like this.
Yeah, I think that the narratives, such as they are when they even exist in games of this genre, what one might call a meat-like, generally are taunting, right? Like the end is nigh, or I want to be the guy. It's like, haha, you're not good enough to play the game. How could you possibly play the game? And then if you play the game well for a while, it just keeps doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
is Celeste the first one of these games that has a story that's about something?
It might be like it has themes and stuff. And if I was gonna say that The End Is Nigh had a theme, like, hey, look, Edmund McMillan is being an asshole to me, and that's like kind of compelling in its own way. But yeah, I
to be clear, I like The End Is Nigh. I thought that was a pretty good game,
and that's a cool experience to have where you're having that moment with the designer where it's like, I see you trying to be a dick because you can.
Yeah. And listen, you get that it's motivational, but also you're still kind of mad a little bit, and that drives you on, and yeah. But Celeste is something really special. I would say that the narrative sometimes feels a little bit heavy-handed to me.
That's fair.
The stuff about depression, where she is sometimes literally speaking to her depression, a characterized version of her depression. But like, yeah, the extra layer there, where also it's about helping you get through this as a way of proving to you that you can get through things, is, to be perfectly honest, so beautiful that I am actually tearing up a little bit right now talking about this platformer.
I do. Yeah, so it is interesting. I do think a decent amount of Celeste narrative can come off as heavy-handed, but I think they do a lot of good things still that make me a little less bothered by it. Like her literally talking to her depression. Yeah, it's heavy-handed, but also it's an actual game mechanic that totally makes sense in the narrative, and that's really awesome. It's something that a lot of games just don't care about doing. And it made it, I could just accept that. I could be like, okay, this is fine to me, right? Because it matters for me playing the game.
I think those are some of the most standout too, chasing battle line, through the caves and stuff. Yeah, or the summit. The sequence of climbing up to
This-
the end is one of the most triumphant things I've done this decade. You know, in a video game, and probably on the list. Otherwise,
Yeah.
maybe at least from
Yeah,
a feeling standpoint.
the summit sequence is incredible.
Yeah.
It's an incredible union of the game as a whole is an incredible union of the mechanics and themes. Like you said, the way that like dealing with your depression is an actual literalized game mechanic. What a powerful use of the medium. A lot of the time in narrative video games, and it's less true now than it used to be, but a lot of the time you have sort of a story layer and a gameplay layer, and to some extent the two don't ever touch. Right, like there's a layer between them, and the story just sort of slides over the top. And you can particularly feel this in like a GTA, for example,
Yeah.
where like
Definitely.
the character in the cutscenes and the character you're playing when you play don't necessarily have anything to do with each other. But I think this is a thing that the games have been getting way better at. But Celeste is still one of my favorite examples of it. But that summit sequence in particular is a triumph of that union of theme and plot and mechanics. The music in that sequence and the way it's like dynamically mixed with all the stage themes as you reach the parts of it where you use the stage specific mechanics, and it is one of the best moments in gaming.
Yeah, and don't get us wrong. I also think that this is maybe the best entry from a design standpoint as well. But it's sort of like Portal 2,
yeah.
where like, yes, I think the mechanics are great and it looks beautiful and the level design is fantastic. The Tower Fall guys really sort of outdid themselves, and the music is great. But like that story though, like that's the thing that's going to stay with me.
Yeah. That's
I
think that's what makes it so much more meaningful than just being another Meat Boy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So before we move on from this is probably a good place to mention it. I should have mentioned it at the top of the show, 90 minutes ago. We have made a conscious effort a little bit to talk about things that are not from this past year, partially because if you're watching this as it comes out, you've just gone through a period of a lot of people talking about the things that came out this year an awful lot. And partially because, we're aware of recency bias and we're trying not to assume that the things that just happened are the greatest things just because we remember them the best. But even though we've made a conscious effort to kind of talk about other stuff, I do want to mention here, while we're talking about incredible unions of mechanic and theme and story, Disco Elysium, which is just like an incredible version of this thing. I don't think we're going to talk about it anymore throughout the rest of this video. There's a lot of people talking about it on the internet, including me. Feel free to go back a couple of days in the channel and find that Game of the Year video. But I think Disco Elysium is incredible at this particular thing.
I just started it and I already agree. So yes.
Celeste is part of that whole genre, what we dubbed the meat-like. I've heard other people say splatformer, which I think is
that's good.
Fine. That's fine as a name. That whole thing is sort of there's definitely a retro revival thing running through, I would say, maybe the past 2 decades. And I would say maybe the splatformer as a group of games is maybe one of like the foremost examples of that. But I know that kind of stuff, that modernization of the old thing, really speaks to you, Mike. So did you have any other games like that you wanted to talk about here?
Yeah, so Shovel Knight, I think, is probably the most retro revivalist of revival games. Kind of feels like, we just got another entry in.
Yeah, it really looks and feels like a Mega Man. It looks and feels like a modern Mega Man. Not in the sense of it being a modern Mega Man, because we have those, and they're mostly pretty bad. But in the sense of it being like, what if people were still developing NES games? This is like an NES game that came out in 2019, or whenever it came out. I don't actually know how long. Shovel Knight's quite a while ago at this point, right?
Oh yeah, I think because really, Yacht Games did like Shovel Knight, but then they also released like 3 expansions and then all. like brawler, and like each one of those would by any other studio be its own completely separate title, but instead they're all just part of Shovel Knight now. So Shovel Knight's been coming out for like 6 years or something like that.
Constant release. Yeah, it seems really cool. I have not had an opportunity to play it, but it really communicates the idea of those older games.
Yeah, it's super fun. I had a great time playing through the main campaign, playing through with my cousin. We sat down and like played the first Shovel Knight all in one sitting. I think
Wow.
it really is like a Mega Man. You know, it's particularly if you're like me and are sort of sad, or we're sad, like the 25th anniversary goes by and like the thing that you got out of it was a fan-made Street Fighter X Mega Man game. Like like that was a dead game series, and a little bit like a dead idea to some extent, at least, you know, in the commercial space. And Shovel Knight comes in very confidently, with a surprising number of modern sensibilities. I mean, it has the bonfire mechanic basically from Dark Souls and a couple of other sort of quality of life things, but it is.
Oh, it's a Souls-like, you're saying.
I mean, in a very broad sense. Fight me.
My steam's coming out of my ears as we speak. No, I mean, sure. Based on what people call Souls-likes, it's definitely a Souls-like. I want to say, as someone who didn't really play classic Mega Mans when they were around, I really enjoyed Shovel Knight. It was a lot of fun, and the fact that you can break the bonfires for money is awesome.
I feel like risk reward is a mechanic we very often in games. It has a sort of permanence that we sort of shy away from, at least in the video game space. So it's sort of interesting to see it here.
Yeah.
Yeah. That kind of like push your luck. How safe do you feel here? Thing I think is often very compelling.
I think it was a Kickstarter too, which, you know, I don't think you can talk about this decade
without talking about Kickstarted games.
You know, there are a number of other success stories, and particularly retro games. There's like a lot of games in an older style that, you know, I don't think would have happened without, you know, Kickstarter as a way of getting them going, or at least like fan interest. You know.
Yeah. Not always for the best. I think particularly in the Mega Man space, there are a couple of games that probably wouldn't have existed without Kickstarter, and maybe shouldn't have.
I mean, I had tried to put that behind me.
Sorry to dredge up bad memories.
Yeah.
Why don't you cover up those feelings by dredging up some good memories, Mike? What else is good in the retro space?
Oh, there we go. So, right, like this fan-made thing. If you want to talk about a genre or like a series of games that has not had it well recently, there's Mega Man, but one sort of stands above the rest, you know, in its bright red sneakers, just sort of crying. Sonic the Hedgehog, right? Like hasn't had a good game.
A series of games that desperately needs to be taken away from the original developers, is what he's saying. They can't be trusted anymore. No, I absolutely hear you. I was a Sega Genesis kid before I had a Super Nintendo. I had a Sega Genesis, and I love Sonic 1 and 2, and I don't think I like any other Sonic games.
I mean, there is something to be said about the opus of the double stacked, like 8-inch tall Sonic 3 in Sonic and Knuckles, like whole assembly.
I had a hard time with that because I was so nervous when I had it plugged in. Because it feels loose. Like you put, for those of you who don't know, Sega published a game called Sonic and Knuckles. And it's a game itself where you play as Sonic the Hedgehog and also Knuckles the Echidna. But part of the sell of it was that it has an opening on the top. You can flip open the top of the cartridge and plug in Sonic 2 or Sonic 3 on top of it, and it will let you play as Knuckles in those games that you were not originally able to play as Knuckles in. Which is, I do think is a super cool idea. But yeah, like he said, it means that your Sonic and your Sonic 2 cartridge is like 4 inches above your Sega Genesis at that point, and it's not secure. It feels like if the wind were to blow particularly hard, the whole thing would just kind of fly out of there.
But it was sort of like a sort of hardware based audacity that I mean it ultimately killed Sega's hardware business, but boy did they do it in a way that no one else would even attempt. Even Nintendo now.
That's the thing I really miss about that time. Like I'm not here to talk trash about the current consoles or anything, but I do miss in the Sega and Nintendo period. There was a real feeling of like them trying to competitively out-weird each other.
You're not
and
wrong.
now it feels like Nintendo is still doing that because it's the only way Nintendo knows how to do business. But like Sony and Microsoft are playing a very different game. They're playing
no
like
one else is in that room with them.
Yeah, they're playing sort of like a very buttoned down, like we're gonna take it seriously kind of game, and they're putting out dueling hardware profiles and talking about expansibility and, well, we're gonna release a new one with a bigger processor, and Nintendo's like, hey, who wants to build cardboard robots?
Yeah, the other ones are really like gaming computers that can't run Outlook.
Yeah.
But Nintendo is off by itself.
Yeah. Thank God they are still, at least.
So hey, we haven't talked about Sonic Mania at all.
It's true. Yeah, right. Like this is I think a great example. Well, and in some ways a cautionary tale, but I'm mostly positive about this experience. Right, is letting the fans, like the people who are doing ROM hacks and like making things have a hand in this particular game. Sonic Mania is in some ways like a remix album of the earlier Sonic games, but I think it really shines brightest with its newer content. They did a couple of new levels that sort of feel like maybe they could have just been part of a game that came out, right after Sonic and Knuckles, which is really what the fans had been asking for like 16 years or whatever the time frame is. I mean, Sonic was like in King Arthur's court and also a werehog, and I think he went to like 1001 Nights and got trapped in a storybook. Like he went some places.
Do you remember when he kissed that lady? It was a human lady. Just full on kissed her on the mouth. Who wanted that? Who was asking for that game?
Maybe we were wrong. Maybe Nintendo trying to out-weird everyone's hardware, and Sega was just doing the same thing with its Sonic games. But
you know what? It's actually a remarkable point. I can't believe I never thought of that before.
I mean, I think some people liked Sonic Colors or whatever, and I remember being excited about Sonic Adventure when it came out. But Sonic Mania, I think, is like sort of a great example of how you can have a great experience revisiting, something that you were passionate about as in your childhood. I think a lot of things don't hold up. You didn't know stuff when you were a kid, but sometimes you can recapture those feelings either with something like Sonic Mania or something like Shovel Knight, which categorically from a design perspective is not really like those old games. It's a lot better, but it captures that feeling, and I think that's what makes these kind of retro revival games compelling. They're kind of keeping that old style alive, like calligraphy or something, but for the game space.
What an analogy.
Well, they should put that on the box. Shovel Knight. It's like calligraphy, but for games.
That would sell it.
Yeah, right next to all of those weird guys, like that knight who has a literal snow shovel, and that mole who's made of lava.
I do feel like every time I see somebody playing Shovel Knight on a stream or something, it's a whole different, weirder thing than it was the last time I saw it. I watched a little bit of Ben Pack over at Giant Bomb was playing it on a Unprofessional Friday recently, and he was like a guy in a plague doctor mask, and he was shooting flying potions, and everything was made of gold.
Strange.
I imagine the Shovel Knight codebase is either really clean or horrible.
Well, it took 6 years, so either there's a lot going on, or a lot had to change.
No, it is cool that they're adding so much to it, though. They keep adding to it.
I think they're done. I think they were done
Yeah,
as of like a month, like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe they technically finished it before the decade started.
They
did
released
not enter a
announcement.
new decade of Shovel Knight.
They said, we're done. Never again. Screw
Yes,
this retro stuff.
So now you can pick it up without worry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a whole.
Shovel Knight.
It is now a complete product, or rather, from what I'm hearing, 6 complete products. Seems like just a huge amount of game.
Probably only 4, but that's not far off.
Who knows? They don't even know.
But yeah, I get it. It supports multiplayer. If you like Mega Man, even a little, it behooves you to try it out.
If you have ever had any love for Mega Man, if you have looked into his beady little eyes and thought, this is the man for me, someday I hope to be as Mega, you should check out The Calligraphy of Video Games, Shovel Knight. That's one way. This retro gaming explosion is one way that the games ideas of the past, the things we loved as children, have come forward with us. Maybe not the healthiest way. There are other ways. I think it would be very difficult to talk about the best games, the most important games, the most significant games of the 2010s without talking about Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey, which are 2 games that get tangled up a lot, I think, in games discussion because they were both launch titles, right? I didn't play Breath of the Wild, but did it not come out?
I think Super Mario Odyssey came out. I could be wrong.
You broke up there so much that we'll never know if you were wrong. Odyssey was a launch title. I don't know, whatever. I played Super Mario Odyssey, and it's great. That's what I want to talk about. I'm tired of this seg. You know what's great about Super Mario Odyssey? Hats.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
It's the best hat game. There are a lot of hat games out there. TF2 is a strong hat game. I'm not going to try to tell you it's not. But I think Super Mario Odyssey is the best hat game.
Yeah, no, Breath of the Wild came out on March, and Odyssey came out in October.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Well, I didn't play it at launch because I don't own a Switch.
Anyways,
the first time I could play a Switch, I could also play Mario Odyssey. So it's launched for me. I think that Super Mario Odyssey, I legitimately think this, and this is a big deal to me, if to no one else. It's the best Mario game.
Yeah, hands down.
I think I feel super comfortable saying that. It's just, part of it is definitely that I am a mark for Mario stuff. It's real easy to make me go, oh yeah, I like Mario. I remember this. And the game does that super well. It will play on your nostalgia relentlessly, ruthlessly. But it's also just like such a wonderful feeling experience from moment to moment. I think this is a thing that Nintendo is so good at. Just Mario games in particular just feel great. Most Mario games, I remember that Sunshine exists, but mostly Mario games just feel great to play. And Mario Odyssey does. Every single moment of it. It's so slick and bright and cheerful and happy, and it remembers a time when you were younger and happier. And it helps you remember that time too. I'm sad. And Mario helped me be less sad. That's what I'm saying.
Agreed. Mario is fun. That's my contribution.
Your contribution.
All right, I think we nailed it. We don't got to talk about Super Mario Odyssey. Here's the thing. I don't think what it's doing is very complicated, and I don't know that it necessarily warrants a huge amount of discussion. It's doing a couple of things that aren't that complicated just incredibly well. Just so beautifully, wonderfully well.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot like Breath of the Wild. That sort of let me get this one thing. Here's this momentary discovery or thing I get to do, and just chain, literally hundreds of those together. It's just such a good design. It's like, I guess it's an extra loop. They put in like a medium length loop that didn't exist in the game structure before, and it works real well.
You mean in the idea of like completing an individual world?
Yeah, like I
Yeah.
get a moon, but it doesn't feel like getting the to me the way it does in the other games. They're more bite size. They honed in on the
Yes.
right amount of
Yeah,
time.
there are tiny little tasks for which you are rewarded all over the place. I am not in general a big fan of the open world games design. I think most of those like Ubisoft games are crummy. I don't like a single Assassin's Creed,
Hmm.
but Mario Odyssey is a version of that totally works for me because I think partially because it removes a lot of the waiting between them. Like in an Assassin's Creed, you're going to spend some time traveling from place to place. Even if you have fast travel, there's still like there's too much downtime. There's too much downtime, and you're doing things that are too similar. Like you might be running around to collect 100 nodes, but those 100 nodes actually only represent 5 different types of things you're doing. So, like, you're going to go to this place and follow someone 10 feet back while they very slowly walk and have a conversation, and you're going to do that 12 times. I hope you don't hate it with every fiber of your being.
Well, and I think it's not only that, but in like Far Cry games, you climb up a tower and it goes like, here are the things you can do in this world. But with Breath of
Yeah.
the Wild, there's so much to do that isn't told to you explicitly. So when you find those things, they're not hard to find, right? You're not a clever person, but you say, wow, this is a unique world to me. That's cool though, right? Like the game lets you do that instead of saying, oh, you must see this content we've created. Let us shove it into your stomach. What you're already
You hear
full,
that?
we're gonna keep
He looked
shoving
the
it
viewer. He looked the viewer dead in the eyes and said, "You are not a clever person." I can't believe it, Shane.
No, but
Your
it's
style
like
of content creation might be too edgy for this channel.
down with the system or something. Uh, no, I think it's really cool that stuff in Odyssey and stuff in Breath of the Wild exist, and they don't feel the need to say, hey, I'm a secret moon, come and get me. It's like, yeah, sure, you know there's a certain number of moons, and you know the number of moons in the world, but it's not like, you get what I mean. It's not this necessity to collect everything and points on a map.
Yeah, they created a world where it feels like you're constantly stumbling into cool stuff.
Yeah.
I think I can't talk about Breath of the Wild without like Moto talks about like Zelda and like the feeling it's supposed to capture, like adventure and discovery. Mm-hmm. For me, Breath of the Wild is the first time it actually worked. Like, this game legitimately feels like the frontier is 5 feet away from you in any direction. Mm-hmm. You just like jump on your super badass horse and go riding around. And I don't know, my experience is probably like most everyone else's, where I had a plan about what I was going to do, and 3 hours later I have been crisscrossing through this like lovingly rendered terrain from point of interest to point of interest. Just like, it reminds me of being a kid and like playing out in the woods. Like, that's a cool place. Like, let's just like go over there and climb that thing and see what's on the other side. And all of the stuff sort of, I think, works together to keep you feeling that way, from like breaking up the classical dungeons into like 5 or 6 temples and all of the other stuff. It's a really, I would say it's the best. I don't know if that's a controversial opinion or not.
I think a lot of people feel that Breath of the Wild is the best Zelda. I think there's still definitely a strong contingent for Ocarina of Time as well. I think Breath of the Wild is going to have a hard time unseating Link to the Past for me, but that's partially just because of where I was in my life.
Right.
You know, at the time,
totally
I was that hit me at the right moment in a way that probably no game is ever going to be able to match in that same way. No game that's doing that same thing.
You only get to have your first time, actually.
Yeah.
I want to mention, just because of Odyssey, I think this is something that people probably think of a little bit. I don't think you guys have played it, but A Hat in Time was really awesome.
Okay.
Also a hat game?
Also a hat game, so it's very important to bring up now. I want to say specifically, not for the same reasons that these games are enjoyable, so I'm really interjecting this at a bad time, but if you've ever played like Paper Mario, the thing I loved so much about like Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door is that you go to one chapter and it's like really a different game. They're telling this whole different story and it's a whole different feel, and you move to the next chapter and it's the same thing, where it's something entirely different and an entirely different experience, but they're all super fun and kind of campy, and A Hat in Time did that thing super well. In some ways, I feel like A Hat in Time was a Paper Mario sequel to me. So
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
yeah, it's a really awesome game.
Well, now I want to play it.
You should. It's awesome. It's a hat game too, so.
There you have it.
So we're talking about games that are the thing about the experiences of these games that really spoke to us was that feeling of discovery / adventure, as someone has thoughtfully written in bold in this document. And it would be super hard to talk about the games of the 2010s that are all about that feeling of discovery and adventure without talking about the Outer Wilds. But we're gonna do it anyway. Here's what I think we should do. There's still a lot of people who haven't played the Outer Wilds yet. There's stuff that I want to talk about super badly, and I know you do too, Mike, that would be kind of spoily. I think maybe that's another video. Maybe that's a different thing that we do at another time, sometime soon.
Okay.
But I do want to say, if you are into games that are about discovery and adventure, the Outer Wilds is the best one of those. Ever. The Outer Wilds is one of the best video games ever. And the gameplay of it is literally just discovery. It's really incredible.
Sort of mechanically, the only progress is what happens in your head, which is an amazing trick when you can pull it off.
Yeah, the only mechanical progress is your knowledge of the world, which is... God, what a good game. My biggest
really
problem
cool.
with the Outer Wilds is that because of what it is, you can never play it again. Like, you could play through the Outer Wilds again, but it will never be the same, because you can't unknow the things that you know. You can't reset your progress in that way. You could
only
try,
get one
but it would
first.
be unsafe. Please do not attempt to reset your Outer Wilds progress. Put down the drill. I see that. You in the back.
late.
Down. Thank you.
Oh, Pi was a scary movie.
Yes, it was.
Don't worry, guy who hasn't played Outer Wilds. I haven't either.
We'll get there. This is part of the reason we're going to do that in a separate video. Speaking of games that you can't ever really play again, before we move out of this section, we got to talk about The Witness, right?
Oh yeah.
This is one of the best games of the decade for sure. No, am I alone on this?
I agree.
Okay, all right.
I've got nothing to add, though. No.
I said that, and then I got so insecure so quickly.
No, I have a lot of feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's probably been long enough at this point that we maybe can talk a little bit more spoilery sort of way, but it's just like the Outer Wilds, and the game is what's happening is almost entirely in your head rather than like physical progress.
And there's a thing that has become the standard now in the way that you learn to play games, where the game's mechanics tutorialize the game's mechanics. Can you remember the last game that wanted you to like read a little booklet outside of the game to know how to play it? Was that 20 years ago, maybe?
I mean, if we're not counting the Zachtronics titles, yeah, 20 years.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Exapunks was like 2 years ago. But aside from that, listen, we're going to talk about Zachtronics. We'll get there. Yeah, The Witness, I think, does that thing better than any other game ever has. And so much of the experience of playing The Witness is about that idea. The Witness is almost a deconstruction of puzzle games told as a puzzle game.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It's so brilliant.
I think if you're a person who's like, how do I teach people things? The best way to get a better idea is to watch yourself play The Witness.
That's a really good point. Like the pedagogical method of The Witness is so clear. Yeah, man. In some ways, it is a game about learning.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I would say it's like a game about games. It's a meta game in a way that nobody ever means when they say meta game.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Jonathan Blow wants to do a lot of having a thematic discussion with the player, and I think like The Witness nails it. Like it's sort of Inception like plants in your head the way and the experience that he's having as a designer seeing the world. By the time you're done with The Witness, it's a gameplay mechanic that it literally changes the way you see the world. It's real good. And it's smart, and it's interesting in the way that people are normally talking about like art house film kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I
I
don't
agree
feel
with
like
that.
there's a lot of games that are doing that in a mechanical way. So I'm so glad that this exists, even if it took us, I forget how long, but like 7 or 8 years between
Yeah.
Braid and The Witness.
Yeah,
I
it's
would say it was
crazy.
worth the wait.
I remember he is quoted as saying that they threw away something like 3 completed games worth of material
Yeah.
on the way to finding the exact thing that he was trying to build, which they did eventually get to.
That's unbelievable. I can only imagine what goes on in that brain, you know what I mean?
Well, what's crazy is he like wrote like a Gama Sutra about the way that you should make games is to write them as like sloppily as you possibly can, because you're trying to optimize for as many gains per life as possible. So he's like, just put it in a for loop, and unless it tips over, don't worry about it. And he threw away 3 full games working like that.
Right.
So that's the crazy thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like an art game, you know, in a way that, you know, we don't normally mean when we say art game. I think. I think it's art. I'm gonna just say it. I think The Witness is game art.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that there are a lot of games that have followed in sort of the footsteps of The Witness and Portal. A lot of the time, more obviously Portal in terms of their like visual design. That I'm not going to name any names here, because what I'm saying about them is they do a bad job. they fail at the thing. The Witness is one of the very, very few games that I feel has succeeded at the thing.
Yeah, and well, I think the thing that's crazy to me is it succeeds for such a long time. Like, it's easy to do that thing for an hour, but The Witness did that thing for me for like 20 or 30 hours.
Yeah, the entirety of the playthrough. I always felt like I was getting more. And there are so many individual great epiphany moments in that game. The glass, the house with the colored glass.
Yeah,
like
what I was gonna mention is we were talking a little bit before we started recording, and I was gonna bring this up, and I was like, I guess I don't want to spoil it. Jeff, that was before the Clustertruck thing happened for my stream, and Jeff was watching the stream, The Witness.
Yeah.
And I spent a full 4-hour stream not solving a single puzzle in that glass area. And the next day, I loaded up the stream, I started playing, and 5 minutes in, I went, oh, this is the solution. Immediately understood it. That was hilarious.
A good puzzle game makes you feel clever.
No, I felt really stupid. Good puzzle game makes you feel clever. A great puzzle game makes you feel stupid.
Sometimes stupid, sometimes clever. You're going for a balance that's somewhere in between.
No. It's crazy to see how much your brain avoids looking at the obvious thing when you think you know the right answer.
Yeah. The mind can really get into a sort of like a rut of thinking where you're just tracing the same path of ideas a couple of times. That's the reason that going away from it for a while and then coming back to it can help, is because you let your brain have time to get out of the rut and start like reset.
Yeah.
Well, I hadn't thought about that symbolism, because the game is just line puzzles. Some people say it's just line puzzles, which is true, but it's the best game of just line puzzles that could possibly exist.
Yeah. Play The Witness.
Play The Witness.
Takeaway.
Yeah.
I think it's funny because it's hard not to sound pretentious talking about The Witness, but it's because it's so good. It's really that good. So please play it.
Yeah. So those games are about a certain type of feeling of discovery. There's another genre of games that sort of this sort of was birthed, I believe, I think this decade, right? This first thing on the list came out just barely during the Target period. Games that are more about discovery of mechanics in a way that I think it's super weird that this thing came back and caught on. We're talking here about roguelikes.
Yeah.
I went to the Steam page for the wrong version of The Binding of Isaac here. I was like, 2014? That can't be right.
No.
September 28th, 2011 is the release date that Steam has for the original Binding of Isaac. That's crazy, because it feels like that game has been out for 300 years.
It plays like it runs like it's been out for 300 years.
Yeah. I wonder what the release date on the original Flash version is. It can't be too much earlier, but it's still earlier.
Yeah.
I love a good roguelite. I don't actually think The Binding of Isaac is one. I would not.
Okay.
Who wants to talk about Who liked The Binding of Isaac? Who wants to talk about The Binding of Isaac?
I think on the original I have like 700 hours, and on the new one I have 400 hours. So...
Okay, it sounds like you.
Yeah, go for it.
I think there have been roguelikes that have come out since The Binding of Isaac that are better. But I think, like you mentioned, The Binding of Isaac was really important in kind of reigniting that spark. Well,
yeah,
the thing we're going to talk about next too. Not to, but the Binding of Isaac meant a lot to me because I had never really known about roguelikes before then. And then, I watched Northern Lion and he started playing this cool game and it seemed cool. And then I got mono for 2 months. So I put 500 hours over the course of 2 months into The Binding of Isaac. I don't know if that math works at all. But
we'll assume that it does.
No, yeah. Like I said, I think there are better games that have come out since. I think there are awkward choices of design that generally the right way to play is a pretty boring way to play.
Yeah.
But, I think it was important for the time. And I still like to come back to it. It's nice that I'm so good at the game now that I can not play it for 2 years and still beat it. So.
Wow, Shane just come on here to brag, or?
Yeah, just saying, no big deal. But there's a game you think is like The Binding of Isaac but better, right?
Listen, I try to be a positive force in the world, Shane. I don't need this baiting. To be perfectly honest, there's probably like a couple dozen games I think that are like The Binding of Isaac but better.
Okay.
Yeah. So you said that The Binding of Isaac was kind of like the thing that kicked this all off, and then you went back because you are afraid of Mike, and you know that he was thinking Spelunky at you so hard that it exerted physical pressure upon you. But I think it's fair to say that it was The Binding of Isaac for a lot of people, because although Spelunky predates The Binding of Isaac by a few years, I also think it didn't have nearly the reach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not as commercially successful.
A lot of nerdy people on the internet played Spelunky in 2008, but The Binding of Isaac is probably where stuff broke through to the mainstream, I would say.
Yeah.
The Binding of Isaac, I think it's worth mentioning. Maybe people are also connecting. It's like somebody sort of processing their lapsed Catholicism a little bit.
Yeah.
The game is super crude, but there's a story in there. In a way that you kind of wouldn't expect about religion and your parental figures and stuff. So I don't know. It's weird to think of a game where you sometimes are literally peeing on stuff, being like that, but it's certainly in the text.
No, you're right. There is a thing to be excavated. It looks very juvenile, but there is an actual story to the game that you have to kind of excavate, and it's sort of, if you play a bunch of it, it sort of slowly becomes clear to you over time. That is really about something. There is really Edmund McMillen to some extent sort of like wrestling with his upbringing and the religious ideas that were sort of laid on him, which, happens when you're a kid. You don't get to choose what religion your parents decide you ought to be.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something there that's genuine and really interesting.
And I will say, like, as I don't want it to seem like I don't think the Binding of Isaac has any redeeming qualities, because obviously that's not the case if I would put it on a list like this. I do think, still to me, one of the most compelling parts of the game is picking up 2 weird items and seeing how they work together. And they're like not really roguelikes that go down that path, because it's a horrible nightmare to program that thing.
And we know that because you told us.
Yeah, and I would not want to have to do it, but it's very, very fun. And there are a lot of people who play the game optimally, and play games in general, they try to play them optimally, but I'm not one of the people. And so I love picking up 2 crappy items and seeing what happens. And so to me, that's always like a fun thing. And even saying, can I beat it with this crappy item and this other crappy item in a weird way?
Yeah.
So...
yeah, I think the roguelike genre as a whole has been incredibly impactful, and it would be hard not to lay a lot of that at the feet of the Binding of Isaac. That said, go play Enter the Gungeon instead. Is what I would say. They're not the same thing. But
no.
Boy, I sure like Enter the Gungeon.
Enter the Gungeon is really good. It's way harder though, and so that's why I don't like it.
I bizarrely bounced off it a little bit.
I love Enter the Gungeon because it does a thing that that I super love in media. I'm words bad at them. I'm gonna come in again. I love Enter the Gungeon because it does a thing that I absolutely love in media, where it just it took a very simple concept and it just committed to it so hard. The idea of a dungeon that's a gun and everything in it is guns. And they just go for it so much.
It's really good.
At some point, you'll pick up a banana, and the banana works as a weapon because it's gun-shaped enough that the Gungeon considers it to be a gun. And if you pick up something that can't be used as a gun, you're cursed. You get cursed by the Gungeon for holding, like, a knife. Because a knife doesn't look like it. What are you doing? Don't you know where you are? It's on the sign above the door.
Yeah, no, that's super good. It's so fun. Just the gameplay of Gungeon is extremely good. I think the moment to moment of Gungeon is the best roguelite. Moment to moment. Well, Dead Cells exists. It's one of the best. But the thing that really enshrined that game in my heart is the degree of commitment, the number of times I laughed upon picking up an item or reading the description or seeing a new enemy or something. Just like the whole game is, there's a fair amount of writing. There's more writing than you would expect in a game like that. And the writing itself is funny. But also the parts of the game that aren't writing are so funny. Yeah.
That's the thing you don't see that often, I feel like, in games.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. Mike, do you want to talk about Spelunky?
I do. I really do want to talk about Spelunky.
I can feel his teeth grinding.
It's radiating out of the modem.
Oh man, Spelunky is like, I agree. Binding of Isaac, probably a broader reach, but most of those people don't make games. But I feel like so much of the indie scene, either owes this decade either owes what it's done to Dark Souls or to Spelunky.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Like, I mean, we're kind of cheating because I think the original Spelunky 2005 or something like that, but they did a remake this decade.
Yeah, the original release of Spelunky was 2008, and then they made a new version that looks a lot fancier in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
But like Spelunky is, I would say, like a pretty solid platform, just generally speaking.
Sure, yeah.
But like, it's random, which was a pretty like crazy and bold thing to do. I would say at the time, certainly I can't think of anything that was even remotely like it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've read multiple articles because they exist about like how did they do the dungeon
Procedural
planner
generation.
and the procedural
Yeah.
generation. It's super interesting. I don't know if this was just some kind of like magical accident or just like a lot of elbow grease or whatever. But in the same way that we talk about The Witness or Outer Wilds, like Spelunky, I think I haven't played another roguelite that I think relies quite as heavily on sort of learning the systems, and it has so many systems that are interacting with each other, in new and interesting and often hilariously lethal ways. It's, getting the first time you get stun locked against a wall by a Yeti, or a boulder crashes through the backside of the shopkeeper, makes him mad at you, and
Yeah.
he chases you around the map with a like the game does a really good job of that other kind of game storytelling, where it's not that the creator had some kind of linear story in mind, but like you are going to be excited to tell someone about whatever crazy garbage happened to you in Spelunky, and all along the time you're generating all these fantastic stories.
Mm-hmm.
You're learning about like, oh hey, I can walk through the side of spikes. They're not dangerous unless I fall on. And all of these other
Yeah.
like important things and tricks and tips you need to learn to get to the end of the game, because it is very
Brutal.
hard.
Yeah.
It is a very hard game and it expects a lot from you. But it's fine because every single time you die, you'll just get to start over in a new and interesting remix of everything. I mean, I know people who still play Spelunky a lot today,
Yeah.
and it came out like at the beginning of the decade. It's some people's forever game.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the great thing, is it can be, right? They're
Yeah.
definitely. I
And I
could
think
only
there's-
play The
there's-
Witness so many times. Because
Probably in the neighborhood of one.
yeah, exactly.
I think there's something really special about the alternate path. Like, you spend so much time learning this very difficult game and getting acquainted with the secrets, and like, if you can have the experience of playing this thing without first being told by the internet how everything works, that discovery of learning the game, and then like you start to feel like you're mastering it, like, yeah, I got it, and then you discover the black market for the first time, and you're like, what is happening here? Like, how is there another whole game in the game? And there's like a legitimate, a second, sort of a second game through, right, where there's a secondary area for each area. Figuring that out was so cool. I am so glad that I played it when it was like still being developed really actively, like before that stuff was all common knowledge, so I got to find out.
Yeah, same here. There's something else we're going to talk about. I feel like Spelunky is one of the games that demonstrated that this was like achievable, and I feel like I've seen it in a lot of indie games. The sort of like, here's a game, and also it turns out it's missed or whatever,
Yeah.
like on top of the thing you were playing.
Yeah. I will say, I agree with you that although Spelunky has been tremendously important, and I would say that Spelunky probably had more formative influence than Binding of Isaac, in part because such a large percentage of the people who played it were people who are already in the indie development space. I think that you're right that mostly games have not made good on the promise of it until Noita. I think Noita legitimately feels like another Spelunky.
Yeah, that's fair.
Where it helps you sort of in that same way generate those incredible stories, and you have to learn all of these weirdly intricate, extremely deadly systems, and Noita is super. I'm really interested to see what that game is going to look like when it's finished. I'm very, very excited for it.
It's really fun. Play Noita too.
You reminded me of a thing that I is worth mentioning. Like, there's roguelites, and then there's roguelikes, which,
Sure,
boy,
yeah.
and I think Spelunky is the most rogue-like of the roguelites. The thing that people get out of playing an NHAC or an Angband or like these other, like, somewhat impenetrable for most people experiences is all of the things that Spelunky does well. It's really a great modern execution of what is actually a fairly old idea.
Okay, I'm with that. I would say that Spelunky is... Oh boy, I'm going to get us in trouble here. Never mind. I was going to say some stuff about definitions. We'll talk about roguelikes and roguelites some other time.
Fair enough.
It's too much. It's too dangerous. It's too likely to send me into a deep, dark place from which I might never recover. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we're definitely not...
Yes.
Much like Pathologic 2. I said we weren't going to talk about games that came out this year much, and I have talked about Pathologic 2 recently in the Game of the Year video. Also, I made a great big post about it on the subreddit because I'm having such an extremely hard time with it. But man, oh man, is Pathologic 2 like an incredible experience. It's a remarkable triumph of the I was going to say the genre, but by genre I meant video games. The medium. It's a remarkable triumph of the medium. I can't stop talking about it. I don't know if I'll ever be able to make myself play it again. But I can't stop talking about it. It's so bleak. Like, as a piece of art designed to evoke in you a certain set of feelings, it is the most successful video game of all time, I would say. It's so... It makes me scared in a way that video games don't usually even try. Like, there are horror games. There are multiple genres of horror games. But first of all, a lot of horror games are not even scary, because there's a big difference between being startled and being scared. And that's a thing I feel comfortable fighting people about in the comments. Jump scares aren't actually scary. Let's do this. Down below. But, listen, anybody who posts an angry thing, that's just engagement. YouTube likes it.
Like the video, too.
Yeah, don't forget there's a bell somewhere. But I think Pathologic 2 is a really remarkable achievement. I cannot stop telling people, go find out about this thing. I don't even want to tell you anything more about it right now. If you think you can handle an emotionally difficult experience, Pathologic 2 is a really remarkable, emotionally difficult experience. Go look for that thing. I'm done talking about it. That's... Go ahead.
Me and Allison sat down and played it. We played one session of it, and we never found the time to play it again because we're terrible people. But it was about 2 or 3 hours, I think. And there were like multiple points where we were sitting there debating what the right decision to make was. And like, I've never like dreaded trying to make a decision between multiple things because I felt like I didn't know what to do. It's it was like real life.
And the game does a really good job of making the consequences of your decisions significant.
Yeah.
It's not... Most video games play it really safe with that kind of thing. Most video games are terrified of making stuff missable. So, like, they never want to do anything permanent in the sense that it might cause you to somehow miss content. But that is not what Pathologic 2 is like.
And I'll mention, like, one of the first things we did in the game, I know you had played a lot more than me at this point. I'm not sure how much more. But I said, kind of beating around the bush, hey, did you see something, without saying exactly what it was? And you were like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah. And to me, that was like, okay, this is awesome. This is like there's 2 hours in, and there was such a divergence of what happened.
There's both a breadth and a depth of experience there.
Yeah.
That is really... The game gives you too much to do and too much to handle, and the time systems in the game are brutal. Like, this is the only game that I have ever played where... No, that's not true. I was about to say this is the only game I've ever played where I think the survival mechanics actually add anything at all, because it is a game where you have to like eat and drink and sleep. I think the survival mode in Fallout New Vegas is actually pretty cool. Like it helps add a dimension to that story that you don't get if you don't play it that way. So it's not the only one, but it's definitely the one where I feel like those systems are the most significant, especially in terms of the way that they make you choose. Like, I need food. I have to go scavenge for food. I'm broke, but like, first of all, doing so is dangerous, and secondly, I don't know if I go look for food, am I gonna get to this guy to treat him soon enough? Because you're a doctor in a town where there's this, like, a serious contagion going on, and you're like weighing your own needs against other people's in not a video gamey, like, do I save the puppy or murder it for no reason kind of way, but in a, like, which of these two things is less evil? Like, I'm legitimately unsure, and I don't know how I can help people the best, and oh my god, what a good game.
It seems like when you describe it as emotionally difficult, you mean it don't normally mean when they're talking about a game being emotional.
Oh yeah, no, it's not like, yeah, it is draining. It is not like a trivial thing to play.
It is unpleasant. The experience of playing it is unpleasant. And
if you can deal with that, you should buy the game and play it because it's awesome. And if you can't, it's understandable, but you should still watch it.
If you are a person who thinks that Pathologic 2 is not for you, either because you tried it and it's just too much, or I guess you don't like it, which I think is probably going to be the case for actually a lot of people, or you listen to this description and you already know that it's no good for you, there are some fascinating video essays and stuff that have been made about it. I would go check that stuff out. I think that Pathologic 2 is a capital I important game in the history of games in a way that will become clear in like 10 years.
I think it's like the single player game version of Evil. Glad it exists.
Yeah.
You're glad it exists, but you don't ever. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Okay, let's move on to something that is equally emotionally draining. Here's the thing. I didn't know which of these to talk about, so we're just going to talk about all of them kind of as a group. Every 2 years? Something like that?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Every year or two, we'll say, a puzzle game comes out that I am just absolutely in love with. And that puzzle game is almost invariably made by a guy whose name is Zach Barth. He runs a company called Zachtronics, and they make my favorite puzzle games. So we're just gonna like quickly talk about Zachtronics as a whole, I guess. They're all very good. So like I would say the Zachtronics games all belong to, there's sort of like two traditions of them, right? There's these games that are like spatial programming games, almost like, I'm going to say a thing that's technically right, but that's going to be off-putting to some people, and I want you to just trust me and stick with me here. They're sort of games about microprocessor design.
Yeah,
but like
and that they are literally about it.
Well, some of them are, yeah. Opus Magnum's about sorcery. But
yeah,
also
microprocessor sorcery.
Yeah, a sorceress microprocessor that you're building. So about half of the games are that, and half of the games are about like assembly programming. In a pretty literal way a lot of the time. And that might not sound... First of all, some of you out there, your ears perked up. Go buy them right now. Opus Magnum, Exapunks, Molex Synthes. Type Zachtronics into your Steam.
Yeah,
you'll
Cam.
find it. Yeah, Space Cam. It's all good stuff. For those of you who are not yet convinced, it is a little bit more fun than it sounds like. I think that the subject matter, if you just talk about them in terms of what you actually do in them and the subject matter, they can sound a little dry. But I think actually they're all really fascinating, compelling experiences in like what it is to build a solution in a puzzle game and the idea of optimization. It's not enough to have a solution. They compel you, not by forcing you, but they compel you to make a solution better. And one of the ways that they do that is that almost every one of them, maybe actually every one of them, they have this thing that happens when you complete a puzzle. It shows you a series of charts. It shows you, based on a couple of different criteria, how well your solution does compared to the solutions of other people who have played the game. And it shows you a graph that like represents your position against everybody who played the game. You did it this fast. That's where this falls on the global curve of fastness. Here's all the people who did it. But then it also includes next to that a list of every person who is on your Steam friends list and how their solutions fared. And that's, I think, the real devilish move. Because sometimes I'll complete a puzzle, and it'll be like, Mike did it 3 cycles faster. And I'll be like, well, I can't move on to the next one then. Fuck Mike.
This is why I have not actually completed any of these games, because I have to beat you and also everyone else in every category of optimization.
And they're all, like, all of the systems are designed in such a way that there are multiple different things to optimize for. You can really focus your designs in different ways. There's a ton of different functional solutions to each puzzle, but it's so much about, like, about not just finishing, but about squeezing every little bit of finishing out of the puzzle in a way that I find super compelling. Each one of these games is a ton of hours of puzzle stuff, and they're never very expensive. Well, like, Infinifactory was $25, and I think that's the priciest one that there has ever been.
Yeah, and I think maybe the worst. I mean, I think it's still good, but yeah, even like TIS 100 is I think probably sub $10, and that's a little puzzle game.
Yeah. So I've done videos on a couple of them. Molek Sintez pretty recently, and Exapunks before that. Exapunks is so good. These are games that are not for everybody, but I hope that for the people whom they are for, they are really, really for you. But I cannot stop evangelizing. I just want people to see these games and love them.
I have to say, like, I'm a software developer by trade, and the Zachtronic games capture the thing about engineering as a profession that is why people want to do it and keep doing it. There's something immensely satisfying about mastering a system and becoming fluent in it and being able to solve increasingly more complicated problems with it. And that, like, fundamentally is what a lot of, like, electronic and software engineering is about. And this is, like, taking all of the boring bits out of the way and then, like, doing it, you know, you're assembling molecules with, like, a train, or passing alchemical symbols around with tiny little arms, and it works real well.
Yeah, it's, God, these games are good. Every time one of them comes out, I am so excited. I know I'm gonna lose 3 or 4 entire days. I'm gonna be seeing puzzle solutions in my head when I'm sleeping. Another thing that I really, really like about the Zachtronics games is that they almost all have a really convenient way of sharing your solutions. Like, most of them have a make a GIF of this button, so you could just get a thing and immediately post it on the internet. That's how I found out about Space Chem. It was people posting on, like, something awful, showing their solutions. I'm like, what is this? What is happening here? That's, I think, a brilliant move on their part from a marketing perspective, because the kind of people who are into that thing are going to want to share it.
Boy, and do I have a whole folder on my desktop of just little images of machines?
I upgraded my computer recently and had to wipe a hard drive, so my desktop is clean except for the Molek Sintez GIFs that I have on it.
It's real good.
Okay. You know, sometimes I look at the games that I like, the sorts of games that I champion, and I think, man, maybe I have really niche taste. You ever get that feeling?
All the time.
I know it's true.
I know this to be true. I have very niche taste. This decade was a big one for a genre of games that I sort of thought of as being in my weird niche taste, that I sort of wonder now. Maybe these games have wider appeal, and it's just that they didn't get into the broad public consciousness for whatever reason. The immersive sim. The 2010s were a great decade for the immersive sim. Or maybe not. I don't know. I guess it depends on, because the genre might have died again. It's possible, based on the sales of the last couple of big ones, that maybe there won't be any more for a while. But I think some of the best immersive sims ever have come out in this decade. So there was a big explosion of them in I should have done some research. I want to say the 90s, around the time of like Thief and Deus Ex, and that stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of games emerging from sort of a System Shock 2 kind of place. Did you know you can't just type the word thief into Wikipedia and get a page about the game?
That's what the Dark Project is for.
Yep. Do you remember when games used to have subtitles for a reason? Instead of just every game having the subtitle Origins?
Which one of which made our list?
Yeah, you're not wrong. Yeah, so there was this explosion of these games like in the 90s, and then they more or less went away for a while because they're very work intensive. It takes a lot of effort to build one of these things, and they don't sell all that well, apparently. Also, a bunch of bad ones got made, and that hurts. Nobody liked Deus Ex Invisible War. And when I say it like that, it makes it sound like they were being unfair. That game's not any good. So I get why they didn't like it. But yeah, there have been some really big ones. The Dishonored, I think, played a big part in sort of like revitalizing the genre. That first Dishonored game, my impression is that it hit pretty big, but also I really only hear from a pretty specific niche of people. So I don't know.
I think
maybe it wasn't
hit big, and that's all that matters.
You know what we're talking about is whether things that hit big for us. What am I even?
Yeah.
I don't care what other people think. I barely care what you guys think.
Oh.
Not to dampen your enthusiasm or anything. But I love immersive sims, and I think probably the one I love most, for a couple of pretty weird reasons maybe, is Prey. Prey is a phenomenal game. Did you guys play Prey?
Yes.
I don't think I have a computer that can run it currently.
Yes.
I love Prey. Prey was really fun.
Prey does, so if you're not familiar with the immersive sim, what I sometimes call, jokingly, half derisively, an 0451 game. They're games that are very systems-based. So they're usually about you're playing a character who is going through a series of levels, of areas, and in those areas, you are presented with problems that have a variety of solutions. They're often like, you get to, if you built your character in like a sneaky way, maybe there's a stealthy way through without alerting the guards. If you built your character for combat, of course, you can just murder the hell out of everybody. If you built your character for intellect and speech, maybe you can talk your way past the guard. Maybe knowing that you were going to have to deal with a guarded area, you snuck into a locker room somewhere else and stole a uniform, and now you're going to sneak through that way. Like, the early immersive sims were very often, like, just a couple of pretty obviously bespoke paths. Like, oh, there's a vent over there. I'll crawl through the vent. That's the stealthy way for this area. More recently, they've been doing a better job of like systematizing this stuff. This has been a great decade for systems taking over game design in a way that's a real double-edged sword. But like roguelikes have been a huge part of that. And I think immersive sims both benefit and do not benefit from that kind of thing. But I think one of the reasons that Prey really stands out to me, first of all, is that it doesn't... So a lot of these games like Deus Ex and Dishonored, like I said, have a series of discrete levels. You're going to do the thing in the brothel in Dishonored, and then you're going to go to the bar and do the thing in the bar, and then you're going to go to the place where the party is, that city block where the masquerade ball is happening, and you're going to do stuff there. And when you finish one of those things, you are lifted out of the level and placed elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Prey, the whole world of Prey is this little space station. And you can kind of go everywhere immediately. They really let you hang yourself if you're not careful. But like, I love that I love that you have access to the whole space. Not really immediately because, key cards and whatever. There's certainly like a Metroidvania-ness about it. But I really love the freedom that they give you to decide what order you're going to do things. But also, I think one of the things that's most significant about Prey is the way that it really just leans all the way into that systematization of the immersive sim ideas in the Mooncrash expansion. Did you play Mooncrash, Shane?
No, I've really wanted to. It seems really cool.
It's a full-on 0451 roguelite.
Yeah.
And it's incredible to play it and realize that these games are kind of the same genre. Like, there are ways in which the roguelite and the immersive sim are 90% the same from a design perspective, which is just fascinating to me. I had such a good time with Moon Crash. It is such a clever thing, and it does so many of the things that we've lauded over the course of this video, with like the story that pretty much has to be excavated out of it. That it's not going out of its way to really tell you exactly what's happening. And oh man, I had such a good. I love these games, and I think Prey is maybe my favorite one.
Well, now I have to play Moon Crash. So
yeah, I'm sort of sold provisionally.
Also, Moon Crash did one of my other favorite things that games do now. It had no PR campaign. They announced it when it was released.
That's great.
It was like, I think it was at E3. They were doing a presentation, Arcane had their presentation at E3, and they were like, here's a new thing we're going to do, and by going to do, I mean have done. Feel free to go purchase it immediately.
Available now everywhere.
I bought it that night. I bought it during the announcement. I believe started the YouTube series the next day.
I do have to say, too, Prey is just also very fun to play. Like,
it is. It really is.
Everything's really well made. It's fun to shoot the guns. It's fun to use the abilities. That helps a lot. So, like, I agree with everything SB said. I just want to say, like, even if those things weren't there, it's a really solid game.
Yeah, and I think that, like, the design of the immersive sim really helps with it feeling fun, because if you don't like some of the types of gameplay that are in it, you can just not engage with those.
Just don't do it, yeah.
You can just always do the part of the game that feels like the most fun to you. I think Dishonored 2 is a great example of that. Mm-hmm. I didn't think that the actual, like, just like face-to-face sword combat in the first Dishonored was all that great. It's a little bare bones, so I don't fight people in Dishonored. Dishonored 2 added like a whole bunch of parry systems and stuff, and in Dishonored 2, I sword fight people all the time, constantly. Not just because I'm bad at stealth, this time on purpose. And it feels great, and I love that I can just engage with whatever part of those things I want to engage with.
Well, and I just want to mention Dishonored 2 had some of the coolest level design I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, there are a couple of real
awesome levels.
Yeah, a couple of real showcase pieces in Dishonored 2. Also, I don't know if you played. I thought the expansions for Dishonored 1 were extraordinarily good. The Brigmore Witches stuff I thought was. You play as Dowd.
Oh. Okay.
In one of them, and you are doing a story that is happening at the same time that the main story of Dishonored is occurring. And
That's cool.
The way that it sketches in the rest of the world, like the story building in Dishonored and Prey, the world building, and man, I'm gonna stop gushing. I just really love these games. I strongly recommend you try them. Also, I have some, series on the channel if you want to watch a thing.
I do want to mention another part of these sorts of games that I really like, that I think maybe I'm in the minority here, but it's really fun to me. If you're playing a stealth game and you get caught, a lot of the time you fail. That's it, right?
Yeah.
There were lots of moments in Prey where I felt like I put myself in a bad position, where there was a giant monster outside of that door and I had nothing to fight against it. And trying to overcome that was fun. That was engaging. That was immersive, where it's like, I'm just here. Like, I'm not going to reload 2 saves ago. Like, I could, sure, but what's the engaging part of this game to me right now? It's trying to overcome this obstacle that in some ways I've created for myself. And that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, the feeling of improvising a solution.
Yeah,
is just
exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And that's kind of one of the things that I think is great about the other game that we've put in the immersive sim category here. I think that maybe some people are going to disagree. I only like 70% mean it when I say this, but I think Hitman 2 is maybe an immersive sim, and like a very good one.
It's really fun.
Hitman 2 is we wrote Hitman 2. We mean the Hitman games, the two new Hitman games. They're effectively just one game, really. One extended game. And God, I liked the old Hitman games. I've gone back and played them not that long ago. You don't need to go back and play them. You remember that thing we were saying earlier about how you can't go home because your home's not there anymore? That's Hitman. But the new ones are really good, and they're you could call them puzzle games. You could call them third-person action games, but I think maybe you're not playing Hitman right. if that's the way they feel to you.
I
but
think,
they're... Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think, like, there isn't really anything all that special about, like, the design of the Hitman games. I just think the people who designed the levels and essentially the things you can do did such a good job, right? Like, you have to do that thing well, and it doesn't matter how good the systems in the Hitman games are. The levels in Hitman 2 are so amazingly designed. There's so much cool stuff you can do and so much fun stuff to discover that you can just play them over and over and over again and not feel like it's the same game. So I just want to gush about how well that's done.
There's a density of content there, and I disagree about the system. Okay. I think the systems are incredibly well designed. The Hitman games are very much about the systematization of solution in a way that I think that they hit that beat better than anything else on the market. And also they do it while maintaining a tone that somehow is always serious and very, very funny. Like there'll be some stuff in there about like, this guy's a real piece of garbage. He child soldiers and these are some deeply evil people, and you are going there to do some very serious things to them. But also, you might kill one of them with a hamburger. It's not impossible. I want you to, when you get down there, you just do what you got to do, man. If a hamburger is all that's at hand, you hamburg them.
Yeah. No, and it's nice that they definitely include stuff where it's like, there's the guy who wants to hamburg them, so we're gonna include the hamburger.
Yeah.
And I'm that guy, so I appreciate it.
I like getting to do it both ways. Sometimes I want to do like a really cool thing and just be like, they give you the opportunity to marvel at your own skill and badassness, but also to hamburg people.
Yeah.
And they're both totally viable. Do you know how many people I've killed with muffins in that game? There's a whole level that's just about muffins.
I think
we can move on. I just like
my favorite
I just
part
love it so much.
About Hitman 2 though is the briefcase. The slow moving briefcase.
That's a great example of the developers totally getting what their audience wants. In Hitman 2, they added a briefcase that you can take into levels and you can hide a lot of different types of items in. There are places in the game where, you don't want to be walking around with a gun out or whatever. And so they give you a briefcase, and you get, like, your sniper rifle can be broken down and hidden inside the briefcase, so you can move the sniper rifle to places. The game, getting the sniper challenges in Hitman 1 was really hard sometimes because of how difficult it was to move the rifle around.
Yeah.
Without getting murdered. And the briefcase has definitely taken some of that away. It's still fun to do sniper no briefcase runs. But you can, like anything else in Hitman, almost literally every object in the whole game, you can hurl it at people's heads. And for the sake of physics or something, they made it move. It doesn't move super fast, and it does this excellent like end over end spin when you throw it. So when it collides with somebody, it looks real goofy. But people discovered that it moves slowly enough that if you engage certain kind of escape behaviors on the AI, they run only marginally slower than the briefcase, so it will take several seconds to catch them sometimes, and all items in Hitman, when thrown, home in on the person you threw them at. Usually they move so fast it doesn't matter or look weird. But if you throw the briefcase at a guy on a bike or something, it will chase him for 15 or 20 seconds, turning as he turns and inexorably drawing closer. And when the devs found, people started posting about it online, and when the devs found out, in the next patch, they put in a patch note that was like, change the briefcase to move at a more reasonable speed, LOL JK. And then they added challenges to the game that are about using the briefcase in that way. In one of the new levels, they put in a guy on a jet ski just so that you could have something moving fast to throw the briefcase at.
It's so awesome that there are so many times where something like that is discovered and the devs are like, oh, our game's so serious, we can't have this. And they're like, oh, this is awesome. This is why people love Hitman. And that's so cool to see. So buy their game because they're cool people, and that's the only reason. And the game's
Truly.
good too.
Truly, these are the Sims that are immersive. Hey, Mike, what else would you say is immersive?
Boy. So I think one of the things that happened this decade that was super interesting was we actually got some VR experiences that felt like they mattered a little bit to video games as a whole.
There are actual VR games now. It's like Lawnmower Man.
Yeah.
Boy. Boy, that's an old one. But speaking of things that kind of look a little bit like they might come out of Lawnmower Man, there were a couple of things that I think my cousin had like access to a Vive in a way that was pretty cool, and I got to play like most of the games that had come out on the Vive at the time, and I would say that there's a couple of experiences about that really stand out, but I think there are two of them that are kind of important. One is Budget Cuts, which I think is finally out now, but at the time I played it was more of like a tech demo of like what the Vive could be, and that was sort of the first time I saw it. I'm like, no, I get it now. Like you could really actually make a pretty cool experience out of VR and have it be compelling, even with the limitations that we sort of have today. I mean, you wouldn't think it would work on paper. You can't really like walk very far with a Vive, so the way that you move in Budget Cuts is you sort of like throw a teleport portal somewhere and then like step into it, and now you are in a different location. But so they made this awesome stealth game where you like throw knives at robots like from behind desks and like teleport to the other side, and it all feels fantastic and supernatural. That's with a space in the middle there. It's very natural, not supernatural. And the same thing goes for any of these sort of simple tasks like shooting things, swords, etc. I think the best of which is Beat Saber. I mentioned hours ago at this point that I miss DDR, and Beat Saber is such an interesting successor to that, in the VR, sort of just like a rhythm Jedi, just kind of slashing through bricks to the beat.
Man, all right, I understand why they couldn't, but they should have called that game Rhythm Jedi.
Beat Saber, it's amazing. I am a person who has always been really bad at rhythm games, and I've never like had something that made me compelled enough to like try to get good. And when I played Beat Saber, I was like, oh my god, I need to keep playing this. I can't stop playing it.
To a certain extent, I think that was a lot of people's experience with it, not necessarily in terms of it being a rhythm game that finally works for them, but being a VR game that finally works for them. I think for a lot of people, Beat Saber was the moment when they went, oh.
I get it.
This is a real thing. We can do this.
I think I will never have another opportunity probably to share this anecdote in this kind of setting, but like Arizona Sunshine, right, is a zombie shooter, and it's a little bit more of a built-out game. A lot of these VR experiences are pretty short and self-contained, which actually makes them fantastic for like party experiences where people get to try things in 10-15 minute increments. My aunt was playing Arizona Sunshine and attempted to lean on a car in a natural way to like reach into the trunk to get something out of it, which obviously didn't work because none of that stuff is physically. But like this wasn't her first rodeo. Like she knows that and had played other VR things. Like when people talk about like a virtual reality, we're actually starting to get things where like sometimes you have to remind yourself that kind of once you're in the magic circle, right, and like playing the game, that like it's not there and you can't interact with it 100% the way that you would normally interact with it, but it feels so good and natural that that's like what you want to do.
So what you're saying is that these games have become so immersive that my seg earlier makes total sense.
Oh yeah, I would say that's my. I definitely stood. Go ahead.
I'm starting to get a little preemptively defensive about them. Listen, it's late.
I definitely stood on top of a hole that I dug in Minecraft VR and dug the brick out from underneath me and fell like very far, and I ended up like in a crouch. I basically fell over in real life. I mean, it's a pretty crazy experience.
I have heard other people talk about that exact experience, digging out the block beneath you in Minecraft, and it like causing them to actually fall over.
I'm really excited to play Half-Life Alyx, and I'm excited to try Boneworks. VR is very cool, and hopefully it's more than just a gimmick, honestly. That's the thing I have to say.
People have been so dedicated to it. It has been it was a dumb gimmick for such a long time, and people were still trying so hard. I feel like there's something about VR that speaks to the human imagination in a way that makes it so we're not going to give up. We're going to get there eventually.
We have to, or else I'll be sad. And that no one wants that.
That's the end goal. When everything is said and done. Shame.
Speaking of virtual reality,
Speaking of things that could never exist in reality.
Exercise? A game I wanted to mention is Ring Fit Adventure, which is a very strange game. Not a game I would ever have expected to put on a Game of the Decade list, especially. But I remember when like Wii Fit came out, I was like, wow, that's dumb.
Yeah, there have been people have tried to do this thing, the exercise game, honestly pretty frequently for a very long time.
Yeah.
And it never works.
But I've played a decent number of hours of Ring Fit, and it's like, it's a game, it's a video game, and I actually want to play it because of that. And that's awesome. I think it's cool that Nintendo has put so much work into trying to get people into shape. Like, I think that's a good thing to try and do. And I think they've done a really bad job up until this point.
For the most part, yeah.
I think Ring Fit does the thing. Like, finally, I think it's really fun. It's really compelling. It gives you more of a reason to come back other than, I want to do 50 more squats. It's like, no, I want to play more of the game. There are mini games in there that are fun, you know?
Any exercise game that relies on being driven primarily by your desire to exercise is at some point going to get cut out of your exercise, because who needs all this gamification nonsense if I was already going to exercise?
Yeah, exactly. It needs the game first,
the thing I
Ring
keep
Fit
hearing
does it.
Yeah, the thing I keep hearing from people about Ring Fit is that this is the one that actually works.
Yeah.
They actually figured it out.
Not since Dance Dance Revolution.
Hey, we've got Beat Saber too. So.
Yeah, I bet it's not. I mean, it's just not as physically tiring as the hardest stuff.
High level DDR and into the groove and stuff. I've seen some incredible feats of athleticism.
It is crazy seeing someone who's really good. Yeah.
Frankly, I think that people's desire for exercise games is pretty puzzling, though. It's the last transition, and you can give this to me. We're gonna talk about puzzle games.
I'm super happy about it, honestly.
You did so well. I was really impressed. There were multiple times where I was like, wow, I couldn't come up with that transition. You can tell it's late. That's all I'll say.
One. Okay. Puzzle games. Unlike a lot of other things on this list, puzzle games didn't go through like a weird lull and then come back with a vengeance. Puzzle games are not doing like a huge number of super new things. I just think puzzle games this decade have been really great. There have been some like phenomenal experiences in the space. We talked about The Witness already. We talked about Hitman 2 already, which I would argue is also a puzzle game. And those games are awesome. And probably, I'll go ahead and say, I do think The Witness is probably the best puzzle game of the decade. But I think there's some other stuff that came out that's really noteworthy. So again, for the last time, we're going to breach the not talking too much about recent stuff rule. because Baba Is You, I just gotta say, Baba Is You is so good. It's incredible in the way that it's kind of, but not really, a programming game, sort of, but it's about programming reality, and it's incredible the way that, like, the fact that, let me start from what the game is. Baba Is You is a puzzle game where your whole goal is to move an object to an object. You want to move your body to the flag that makes you win the level. Touch the flag, win the level. That's like Video Games 101. But unlike most puzzle games where, you're given a set of rules and you have to figure out how to navigate those rules to make the victory condition happen, in Baba Is You, the puzzles are part of, or the rules are part of the puzzle. They're on the table. You can move them around and do stuff to them. And the way that lets you like discover solutions is so cool. I'm saying almost exactly what I said in my Game of the Year video, but I just think it's so damn cool. And it's a game I'm working through very slowly, a little bit at a time, because the puzzles get just fiendish. They get very difficult.
Yeah.
But it has become a part of my life now to come back to it every once in a while in a way that makes me nervous about what's going to happen when I get to the end. There's a non-zero chance I'm going to get to the end of this thing and not be able to finish it, because it will mean there's no more Baba Is You.
Understandable, dude. I can't fault you there.
Anyway.
It's such like a whim. It's like they're not. It shares some DNA with games, but it's so whimsical.
You cut out a bad moment there. It shares some DNA with what?
So it sort of really shares some DNA with Zachtronics games.
The Zachtronics,
Zachtronics, yeah.
But it's so whimsical, and it's such a fundamental rewrite, literally, of the way that an otherwise simple game experience would work, that it's just a really good idea. And I'm a little sad that I didn't have it, which is always like a really great place for a game to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I will say, like, I think one of the really cool things about Baba Is You is the Zachtronics games, I think, are pretty obviously programming games, if that makes sense. But
yes,
I think
it does.
Baba Is You, yeah. I think Baba Is You is less obvious, and it sort of covers some of the same ideas in a little bit of a more roundabout way, whereas the Zachtronic games are a bit more direct. And
yes,
like for Allison, my girlfriend, I don't think she would enjoy the Zachtronics games. Like, I think they're too directly that thing. But she really liked Baba Is You. And I think that's a cool thing, that it's doing a similar thing. And I bet she could play through all of Baba Is You and finally go to a Zachtronics game and enjoy it. But I think it kind of bridges the gap a little bit more. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, okay, I can see that. I just the imaginativity that it allows you in solving problems, like just fundamentally redefining the scope and scale of the problem, is so cool. What a cool idea.
The first time you turn every wall into the game into yourself, and then stampede the objective, it's just like, we have a gem here for certain.
Yeah, I was showing it to my mom. My mom who likes, she's learning to like puzzle games. She's trying to get more into video games. And I showed that to her, and almost immediately, within the first couple of levels, I was like, well, there are like 2 or 3 different ways you could solve this puzzle. And almost immediately, she was finding different solutions that I had not seen.
That's awesome.
Including, I think, is sort of the one that Mike is talking about. There's a level with a lava river, and there's like ways to cause one item to form a bridge over the lava, or there's a way to like bring the flag over to you. And she was like, well, what if I just make all the lava into babas, and then we just walk across the babas? And that's not exactly how it works, because instead what happens is you move all the babas at the same time, and so you're moving 40% of the level toward the exit flag. But that works. That totally counts.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what a good moment. That's like a this is that part moment.
Yeah, that's really cool. Another game that I think had some really cool and unique ideas, ways of engaging with puzzle mechanics that are not themselves super novel, at least they don't seem to be at first, is Fez.
Yeah.
Fez is such a cool thing, and it's also, we gotta we got to talk about Phil Fish, right? Just briefly at the beginning of this.
Yeah.
Our endorsement of the game, the video game Fez, is not an endorsement of its lead developer, Phil Fish. You should play Fez. You do not have to like Phil Fish. You should not like Phil Fish.
He made a really awesome game. He is not a really awesome person. There we go.
Anyway, Fez it seems like a retro platformer, a retro puzzle platformer, but it does some fascinating things with the idea of part of the plot of the game is about the idea of moving from a 2-dimensional world to a 3-dimensional world, and the core puzzle mechanics are based on that. It looks like a 2D game, but all the spaces in the game are actually 3-dimensional, and you can rotate the world, the entire universe, 90 degrees so that you are looking at a different side of it.
Sort of literally revolves around you.
Yes. Which allows you to, if you're, careful about it, walk around things that look like they're in the background and examine the backs of stuff, and they do so many cool things with that idea. The basic, playing the puzzle game Fez is really good. It's a really really great straight puzzle game. But then, as you keep playing it, bits can start to poke out at you. You can start to realize that maybe there's something more happening here. If you just played Fez to 100%, I think you would have a totally satisfying puzzle experience. It's great, the game is a delight. But you can get so much more out of it. There are secrets within secrets within secrets, and I don't want to talk in too much detail about the stuff. We agreed that we were not going to be bothered about spoilers here, because we're talking about why the games are great, right? But at the same time, with a game like Fez, or a game like The Witness, or something, if we tell you stuff about the game, it does actually literally take gameplay away from you. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to be a little cautious about that. But there's a particular puzzle that is probably 3 or 4 layers of stuff deep in Fez, where you have to realize that there's a language in the environment that you can translate, and then you need to work out how to translate it. There's no Rosetta Stone or anything in the game. You just have to look at enough of the language that you can start to do frequency analysis, is how I did it. Just figure out that's probably E, and then work the rest of the language out from there.
I don't know if I should mention this. There is a
No,
place. There's a place that has a direct thing to find all the letters.
I think it does the quick brown fox or something like that.
Oh, okay.
There's a place with a
and
fox.
I'm sure I saw that because I did everything. I've wiped it out of my memory now, apparently. But I definitely I solved the language through frequency analysis because I presumably had not found that yet.
Well, that's totally a viable way to do it, right? So there,
and it's also maybe the most me way to do it. Why would I look at the Rosetta Stone?
Fez is an awesome game on its own, awesome puzzle game, and also sort of has its own ARG.
Yeah.
Its own self-contained ARG.
I really I can't recommend it highly enough.
Yeah.
There's so much cool stuff, and it feels like every time you think you've gotten to the end, it feels like there's another layer that reveals itself.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Perhaps that should have gone at the end. I don't know. I saw a seg there, but that's definitely I think that's the most impressive, one of the most impressive puzzle games of the decade for sure. There are some other things though that we do need to talk about because they're really incredible achievements in their own way, like Return of the Obra Dinn. What a bizarre thing this is. So Return of the Obra Dinn comes from Lucas Pope, who's the developer of Papers, Please, and so it had a lot of heat coming in. People like Papers, Please an awful lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make it an admission here, a confession. I never played it. I never played Papers, Please. I bet it's good.
It is.
Okay.
It is.
Yeah, it's good.
Could have made this list maybe.
I just know that that's what people talk about it, and the sort of the morality you have to impose through your decision making in a way that makes it sound fascinating. I've just never had.
I had Papers, Please on my long list. Just to say.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not surprised by that at all, the way people talk about it. But so I was excited about Return to the Obra Dinn. I'm not trying to big time anyone, but I do want to say part of me having really positive feelings about Return to the Obra Dinn is this is the first game where I just sent an email to the developer and I was like, "Hey, here's who I am. Can I have your game for free?" And he was like, "Yeah."
So we're
So
kind
that's
of
cool.
like we're on a first name basis, you know. No big deal.
I have that feeling,
That
which
is
is
really
nice.
cool, actually.
Again, can't believe my life is so weird. But I think it's really unique, and not just like there's a visual style there that is obviously very unusual. It's not fair to say the visual style is unique because it is intentionally aping what a bunch of games used to look like long ago, although it's doing it in a way that they never could have, certainly.
Right.
But the nature of the mystery to be solved is really unique, I think. I don't know of any other game that is so successfully about the idea of reconstructing a place and a time. And I think that this is a thing that video games are very good at. This is a really particular storytelling strength of the medium that other media really can't do in the same way because of the lack of interactivity, because of your inability to like go back and forth and compare things. I think another game that was really good at this, that is certainly not as good of a game in the overall, is Way of the Samurai. Way of the Samurai is an old game, PS2 maybe, and like the thing of it is, it's a pretty short game. You play through like 3 days in this village in Japan in like that period where the West was sort of taking over. It's one of those things that's about like the last hurrah of the samurai versus the people with the rifles. There's certainly a lot of media that have been made about that. But it just takes place in like 9 pieces. There's 3 days, and you do a morning and an afternoon and an evening on each day. And there's a small group of places you can go in the game world, like maybe a dozen. And when you go into a place, you play out that piece of the story there. It's like you'll do morning of day 1 in the village, and then morning of afternoon of day 2 in the rice paddy or whatever. And because it's such a small thing, it plays out so fast. Like a playthrough from beginning to end is like a couple hours. I just realized I'm not 100% sure whether I'm talking about Way of the Samurai 1 or 2. I've only played one of them, but I don't know which one it was. But you play through it several times, right? And it does sort of a roguelite-y thing in that you are unlocking persistent unlocks as you do that allow you to do different things.
Huh.
But I was really struck by the way that like this is a thing that couldn't exist in another medium, because it's all about going back and re-examining a thing from multiple angles. And while you could make a movie that's like, here's this scene from one angle and here's this scene from another, it doesn't have that self-directedness.
Right.
That really makes the experience what it is. And I think that's what Return of the Obra Dinn succeeds at most, is that ability to like use a particular strength of video gaming, a thing that could only be the thing that it is, and letting you self-direct and examine and kind of solve the mysteries that seem most important to you first, and learn more about the space. And like the idea of reconstructing this 4-dimensional space in this way, it's so cool. And I can't believe it's a thing. Part of me can't believe it exists, because what a weird idea. But another part of me can't believe it took so long, because it's like so much a video game thing.
Right.
Yeah, it's sort of like an extra layer of going. Like, her story, right, is probably worth mentioning.
That's on my long list, yeah.
Yeah, it's the same kind of interesting reconstruction. Shane might even call it almost Souls-like in its examination of a lore and history.
We're reclaiming it. We're making it mean what you need it to mean, Shane. Yeah, her story is... I'm not going to talk a lot about her story, but her story is really great, and it's also super cheap. If it's go look it up. It might sound interesting, and if it does sound interesting, play it, because it totally rules.
And then you will probably also like this.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's... Boy, it sure is a video game, and I mean that in the best possible way. So sometimes you say that, and you don't mean it in such a positive way. And then, finally here, the last game we have written down is Into the Breach, which is a game that I feel like didn't get enough attention the year it came out. And you're going to say, SB, what are you talking? It's on like a bunch of Game of the Year lists. Yeah, but it should be at the top of those lists. I've played all the way through Into the Breach 0 to 100% 4 times.
Wow.
Oh wow.
It's so damn good. It's just like, it's just the right amount of having control over the entirety of the board, but having a limited amount of resources with which to exert that control. It's a brilliant puzzle game that is about fighting giant bugs with giant robots, which is like also super
awesome.
in my wheelhouse. It's like, oh man, Into the Breach is one of the best games in the genre, in the history of the genre. That is what I am saying. Blow up giant bugs, shoot giant missiles, punch stuff with a giant robot.
It's everything you
It
want.
couldn't be better. It couldn't be better. This is everything you've ever wanted.
And in such a legible way.
Yeah.
It does an amazing thing where it captures sort of, it looks like a tactical strategy game, like more like a Fire Emblem or maybe like a Front Mission, but it really is a puzzle game, and it manages to be way more legible, like about what's happening and what you could and might want to do than any of those games that it sort of reminds you of superficially. I think it's a little bit of an achievement.
Yeah, it does an incredible job it is totally the case that you can always glance at a level and know everything about it immediately. Know everything about what it's doing and what's going to happen on the next turn, and that's incredible.
I have not played it, and I thought it was just like a Fire Emblem or something. So
it's doing a lot of Fire Emblem-y stuff
right.
in service of something that I think is a little bit better.
It's a sliding block puzzle, maybe more than it is
a
Fire Emblem.
Yeah, there's definitely like a Sokobani-ness to it.
Okay, well then I definitely have to check it out. See,
am I
I'm
having a
getting things out of
brain?
this.
Yeah, I'm hoping everybody's going to get things out of this, except for me, because I already knew all of this stuff. Encyclopedia Brown over here. That's what the B stands for.
So what's the S?
Encyclopedia.
Oh. Alright.
I'm an encyclopedia, not a dictionary. All right? I don't know how the words...
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
So this has been a partial, non-exhaustive list of the most important games of the decade. I'm going to tell you something. This ran longer than I expected, but if we had done all of the games that are on my list, we would be less than halfway done.
Yeah.
So we had to call it somewhere.
But it was fun.
Yeah, and I hope that this helps some people to discover some things that they didn't get to find the first time around. I made a huge mistake. I pulled up my long list on the other monitor.
Oh yeah, now you're gonna some regret, missed opportunities.
I'm like, oh god, I didn't say anything about heat signature. I didn't even write the name down correctly. I didn't say anything about heat signature or spell its name right. I didn't say anything about Vermintide. Look at all them Vermintides. Did you guys know XCOM 2 came out? The Sexy Brutal is a real game that actually... Okay, we're going to move on. We're going to stop. We did a whole thing about roguelikes and we didn't talk about Dead Cells at all. What?
The list could go on forever, I think.
Okay, the list does go on. I'm going to paste my long list into the video description. And if you want to hear me talk about a game that we didn't talk about, ask in the comments, and I'll give you my 500 words.
Oh man,
Dust Force, you guys, Dust Force.
Yeah, that was actually on my list in the Celeste area. Was Dust Force.
Yeah.
But this is an exercise in disappointment in some ways.
Like life. Everything we do here is an exercise in disappointment. Okay, we gotta go. I'm keeping these guys up. Thank you all so much for making it 3.5 hours into this monstrosity. I'm so thirsty, you guys.
I brought like 3 cups of water.
Yeah, I've got a giant jug next to me.
Thank you all for listening. Come back next time, tomorrow, for normal video game play. None of this stuff. Not for a while. We need to recover. But that video about
years.
That video about the Outer Wilds, that's happening. That'll happen soon.
Yeah, I
don't know exactly
definitely want to do that.
Come back soon for that thing. and we'll see you then.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.